Hey guys, tonight we begin a journey through gaslit streets where artists and aristocrats collide in the shadows of Montmartre. Picture this. It's late November 1895 and the cobblestones of Paris are slick with evening rain. The air smells of roasted chestnuts, tobacco, and something else, something electric. Up ahead, through the mist, a red windmill turns slowly against the darkening sky. Can you hear it? The distant laughter, the accordion music drifting down from the hill. Tonight, you're not just listening to history, you're walking into it. And trust me, what happens in the cabarets of Belle Époque Paris will change everything you thought you knew about art, passion, and the price people paid for beauty. Now, before we climb those famous stairs together, I need to ask you something. If you're already feeling that pull, that curiosity about what we're going to discover tonight, would you do me a favour? Hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, but only if you genuinely want to join me on these midnight journeys through history. And hey, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Are you curled up in bed in California, watching from a rainy night in London? I'd love to know. Alright, dim those lights, get comfortable, maybe let a fan hum softly in the background. We've got a long, beautiful night ahead of us. Let's begin. It's approaching 6 o'clock on a Friday evening, November 22nd, 1895. The sun has already dipped below the horizon. Paris in late autumn gets dark early, and the city transforms. If you were standing at the base of Montmartre right now, you'd see something remarkable happening. Gas lamps are flickering to life one by one like stars appearing in a deepening sky. The lamplighters, actual men with long poles, move methodically through the streets, touching flame to glass. It's a ritual, almost sacred in its precision. You start walking uphill. The streets here aren't like the grand boulevards Baron Haussmann carved through the heart of Paris just a few decades ago. No, Montmartre still clings to its village roots. The streets are narrow, winding, unpredictable. Worn cobblestones shine wet under your feet. Horse-drawn carriages rattle past, their wheels creating a rhythm that echoes off the old buildings. You can hear the horses breathing, see the steam rising from their backs in the November chill. The smell hits you in layers. First, the chestnuts, vendors on corners roasting them over small braziers, calling out prices. 10 centimes for a paper cone full. That's about the price of a cup of coffee, if you're wondering. Then comes tobacco smoke, drifting from cafes and from the pipes of men standing in doorways. And underneath it all, something sharper. Absinthe, that green fairy that's become the drink of choice for everyone from struggling poets to wealthy bankers playing at bohemian life. But let me pause here and paint a bigger picture for you, because understanding this moment requires understanding what came before. The Belle Époque, the beautiful era. That's what the French call this period, roughly from 1871 to 1914. Beautiful, yes, but also built on a foundation of trauma. Just 24 years earlier, in 1871, Paris had been through hell. The Franco-Prussian War had ended in humiliating defeat. Then came the Paris Commune, a radical uprising that saw Parisians fighting Parisians in the streets. Tens of thousands died, buildings burned, the city was traumatized. The Belle Époque emerged from that trauma like a flower pushing through concrete. It was as if Paris collectively decided, we've seen the worst. Now, let's create the most beautiful. And they did. They built memoirs. The Eiffel Tower went up in 1889 for the World's Fair. They revolutionized art. Impressionism gave way to post-impressionism, which would eventually birth modernism. They celebrated pleasure with an almost desperate intensity. But here's what's fascinating and what makes tonight's journey so compelling. The Belle Époque wasn't beautiful for everyone. It was a time of stark contrasts, of gilded surfaces hiding darker truths. Let me give you some numbers that tell the real story. In 1895, a skilled craftsman in Paris might earn about 5 francs per day. That's decent money, enough for a small apartment, food, maybe some entertainment on weekends. A factory worker might earn 3 francs. A seamstress working 14-hour days hunched over the fabric in dim light might take home 2 francs if she's lucky. That's roughly 60 francs per month. Now, picture this. On the same street where that seamstress lives in a cold water walk-up, you might find a courtesan, one of those famous demi-mondaines we'll meet properly later tonight, living in an apartment that costs her patron 3,000 francs per month to maintain. Same street, 2 different universes, and Montmartre, this hill you're climbing right now, sits at the intersection of those universes. It's neither truly Paris nor truly separate from it. It's a kind of borderland, and borderlands are always where the most interesting things happen. As you climb higher, the buildings change character. Down in central Paris, Haussmann's renovation created uniform facades, cream-coloured limestone wrought iron balconies, mansard roofs, very elegant, very controlled. But up here, buildings lean into each other like old friends sharing secrets. Some are genuinely medieval, their timber frames sagging with age. Others are newer but built to look old. There's something theatrical about it all, as if Montmartre is a stage set waiting for its actors to arrive. And they are arriving. Look, there, a young man in a paint-stained jacket, probably an artist heading to one of the studios. His clothes are shabby, but he walks with the confidence of someone who believes his talent will eventually be recognized. Maybe it will. Maybe he's the next Toulouse-Lautrec or Picasso. Maybe he'll die unknown in a cold garret. That's the gamble everyone here is making. There, a couple in evening dress, stepping carefully to avoid the mud. The woman's gown probably costs more than that seamstress will earn in a year. Silk, imported from Lyon, in a shade of emerald green that catches the gaslight beautifully. Her companion, older, distinguished, a gold watch chain gleaming across his waistcoat, guides her around a puddle. They're heading uphill for the same reason you are, to see what's happening, to be part of it. Here's what you need to understand about Paris in 1895. Class barriers are rigid but not impermeable. The official social structure is clear. Aristocracy at the top, then the haute bourgeoisie, the petite bourgeoisie, the working class, and at the bottom, the underclass. But Montmartre exists in the cracks of that structure. Up here, a duchess might find herself sitting next to a piano player. A banker might buy drinks for a poet. The rules are different. The air is getting colder as you climb. November in Paris hovers around 7 or 8 degrees Celsius. That's mid-40s Fahrenheit if you're thinking in American terms. Cold enough that you can see your breath, but not so cold that it's miserable. Just enough chill to make the warm glow of cafe windows look inviting. You pass a small square where a group of men are engaged in heated debate. They're gathered around a barrel serving as an impromptu table, gesturing wildly. You catch fragments of their conversation, something about anarchism, about Dreyfus, about whether Zola has any real talent or just luck. These kinds of arguments happen every night in Montmartre. Philosophy, politics, art, it all gets discussed with the same passionate intensity. Around another corner, music spills from an open doorway. Not refined concert hall music. This is rougher, earthier. An accordion, a violin, voices singing something that sounds like it might be bawdy. This is a caboulot, a low-class drinking establishment. The real Montmartre, the one that existed before it became fashionable, still lives in places like this. But you're not heading there tonight. Your destination is higher up, more refined, though still carrying that edge of danger that makes it exciting. You're heading to where art and commerce have made a kind of peace with each other, where the respectable and the scandalous shake hands and share a drink. As you round the next corner, you see them, a cluster of establishments that have become legendary, though some are less than 15 years old. Their signs glow in the darkness. Le Moulin Rouge with its iconic red windmill. Le Mirliton, where Aristide Bruant insults his customers and they love him for it. And there, a bit further up, the place where you're headed tonight, Le Chat Noir, the Black Cat. But we're not rushing in just yet. Let's take one more moment here on the street, because I want you to understand what's at stake. What you're about to witness, the art, the performances, the mixing of social classes, the celebration of beauty and pleasure, all of this exists in a fragile bubble. In less than 20 years, the First World War will shatter this world completely. These streets we're walking will send their sons to the trenches. Many won't come back. The Belle Époque isn't just beautiful. It's beautiful because it's temporary, because somewhere deep down, everyone senses that the golden moment can't last forever. That knowledge, conscious or not, infuses everything that happens in the cabarets of Montmartre. There is an urgency to the pleasure-seeking, a desperation underneath the laughter. People are grabbing at beauty with both hands because they don't know how long they'll have it. The gaslight flickers. Your breath mists in the air. Ahead, the Black Cat sign swings gently in the breeze. And inside, I promise you, something extraordinary is waiting. But before we step through that door, before we meet the players in tonight's drama, I want you to take one last look around. Remember this moment. The wet cobblestones, the smell of chestnuts and tobacco, the sound of carriage wheels and distant laughter. This is Paris at the height of the Belle Époque. This is the world that Toulouse-Lautrec painted, that Zola wrote about, that continues to fascinate us more than a century later. And now, finally, we're ready. The door to Le Chat Noir stands before us, and beyond it, the most famous cabaret in Paris is just beginning its nightly transformation. The poets are arriving, the painters are finding their usual tables, the absinthe is starting to flow, and somewhere in that crowd, though you don't know it yet, are the people whose names will echo through history. So take a breath, straighten your collar or smooth your dress. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, artist or banker, respectable or scandalous. At Le Chat Noir, all that matters is whether you're ready for what happens next. And believe me, what happens next is going to be unforgettable. Yes, the door swings open, and suddenly you're hit with a wall of warmth, noise, and smoke. It's like stepping into another dimension. Outside, the November cold and quiet streets of Montmartre. Inside, chaos organized into something approaching art. First thing you notice, the smell. It's not unpleasant, just intense. Tobacco smoke hangs in layers near the ceiling like storm clouds. Underneath that, the sharp herbal bite of absinthe. You'll get very familiar with that scent tonight. Someone's wearing too much perfume, something floral and cloying. And there's the smell of bodies in a crowded room, oil lamps burning, and somewhere improbably the faint scent of cat. Because yes, there are actual cats here. At least 3 that you can see immediately, prowling between the tables like they own the place. Which, in a spiritual sense, they do. This is Le Chat Noir after all, the Black Cat. Your eyes are still adjusting to the light, gaslight mostly, but also oil lamps, candles, all creating the golden, flickering glow that makes everyone look slightly more beautiful and mysterious than they probably are in daylight. And standing directly in front of you, blocking your path with the authority of a medieval lord, is the man himself, Dolph Salas. Let me tell you about Rodolphe Selles, because he's not just the owner of this cabaret, he's the creator of an entirely new form of entertainment. Picture a man in his late 30s, though he looks older because he's cultivated this whole persona. He's wearing a kind of pseudo-Renaissance costume tonight. Velvet jacket, ridiculous hat with a feather, the works. It's completely absurd, and he knows it's absurd, and that's precisely the point. Selles is performing every single moment he's in this room. Right now he's looking you up and down with exaggerated scrutiny. If you're dressed well, he might proclaim loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Ah, a prince of industry graces us with his presence. Make way for nobility." Dripping with sarcasm, of course. If you're dressed poorly like an artist, he'll embrace you like a long-lost brother and announce, "Finally, someone of culture arrives. These bankers were boring me to tears." He insults everyone, but he does it with such style that people actually pay for the privilege. Think about that for a moment. This man has built a business model on theatrical rudeness. The space itself is relatively small, maybe room for 100 people if everyone's packed in, which they usually are by midnight. But what it lacks in size, it makes up for in sheer visual chaos. Remember, this place opened back in November 1881, 14 years ago, and Selles has been steadily accumulating decorations ever since. The style he's going for is Louis XIII, or at least a kind of bohemian fantasy version of it. Heavy dark wood furniture that might actually be antique or might be clever fakes. It's hard to tell in this light, and honestly, does it matter? Massive oak tables scarred with initials and wine stains, chairs that don't match, some of them missing legs and propped up with books. The walls are the real spectacle. Every inch is covered. Paintings, dozens of them in ornate frames. Some are quite good. Many are terrible, but treasured anyway because they were painted by regulars who couldn't pay their tab. There's a painting of a cat, naturally. Several cats, actually. Most of them by an artist named Theophile Steinlen, who you'll hear more about later, but who's basically made cats his entire brand. Between the paintings, you've got decorative plates, antique weapons that probably don't work, mirrors in gilded frames, stained glass panels, and what appears to be a suit of armour in the corner, though someone's hung a beret on it and stuck a pipe in the visor. The overall effect is like being inside a very crowded, very drunk museum. Now here's something interesting about the layout. Le Chat Noir is actually 2 rooms. The main room where you're standing now is called the Salle des Gardes, the guards' room. This is where the general public sits. If you've got money to spend on drinks, you're welcome here. But there's a second room in back called l'Institut, the Institute, and that's reserved for artists only. And when I say artists only, I mean it. Sally enforces this rule with almost religious fervour. Are you a painter, a poet, a musician? Welcome to l'Institut. Are you a military officer, a priest, a government official? Stay in the guards room with the other bourgeois, thank you very much. This isn't just snobbery. Well, it is snobbery, but it's snobbery with a purpose. Sals is creating a space where artists can be themselves, can perform for each other, can get instant, brutal feedback on their work without worrying about civilian sensibilities. The Institute is where the real magic happens. The guards room is where they pay for it. You're being led to a table now, small, round, barely big enough for 2 drinks and your elbows. The surface is sticky with spilled wine. Someone's carved "Verlaine was here" into the wood, though you have no idea if it's genuine or a joke, probably both. Around you the room is filling up. It's about 7 o'clock now, still early. The real crowds won't arrive until 9 or 10. But already you can see the mix of people that makes Le Chat Noir so fascinating. At the table to your left, 3 young men in shabby jackets are engaged in heated debate. You catch fragments, something about whether Monet has sold out, whether commercial success automatically means artistic death. They are drinking cheap red wine, the kind that costs 1 franc for an entire carafe. They'll make that carafe last all night because it's probably all they can afford. To your right, a couple that's clearly wealthy. The woman is wearing a dress that probably cost 300 francs, and remember, that's 5 months' salary for a seamstress. It's deep blue velvet cut daringly low at the shoulders. Her companion is older, distinguished, definitely not her husband. They're not even pretending to hide it. That's part of why they're here. At Le Chat Noir nobody judges, or rather everybody judges, but it's all part of the performance. Near the back you spot a woman sitting alone, which is unusual enough to be noteworthy. She's smoking, not a cigarette, but a small cigar, like a man would smoke. Her dress is artistic rather than fashionable, lots of draping fabric in an amber colour. She's reading a book of poetry, or at least holding one. Every few minutes men approach her table. She waves them away without looking up. You'll learn later that she's a regular, a painter who goes by just her first name, Suzanne. She comes here to draw the other patrons quick sketches in charcoal that she sells to tourists for pocket money. The noise level is rising steadily. Conversations in French, obviously, but also snippets of other languages. You hear German, Russian, English with a British accent, English with an American accent. Montmartre attracts artists from everywhere, all of them drawn by Paris's reputation as the centre of the art world. Someone's playing piano in the corner, nothing formal, just noodling around with popular tunes. The piano is comically out of tune, but nobody seems to mind. Later tonight, if you're lucky, someone famous might sit down there. Eric Satie comes through sometimes, Claude Debussy. But right now it's just some nameless musician working out ideas, and the conversations flow around the music like water around stones. Sally has appeared at the front of the room. He's banging a staff on the floor, an actual ceremonial staff that he had made specially, carved with cats and absurdist symbols. The conversations don't exactly stop, but they lower to a murmur. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announces in French, his voice booming, "welcome to the artistic and literary cabaret of Le Chat Noir, founded by me, the magnificent Rodolphe Salas, gentleman cabaretier." He pauses for effect. "We have with us tonight representatives of all the best families of Paris." Another pause. By which I mean, of course, the artists who actually make this city worth living in, and also some bankers who are paying for their drinks. Laughter ripples through the room. A well-dressed man at a centre table raises his glass in mock salute. Salis notices and immediately pounces. "Ah yes, Monsieur Dupont, still trying to buy culture by the glass. I see. How is that working for you? Has any taste rubbed off yet? Or are you still as Philistine as ever?" More laughter. Dupont, if that's even his real name, is grinning. He's getting exactly what he paid for. The chance to be insulted by the famous Rodolphe Salis. But here's what's brilliant about what Salis has created. It's not just insult comedy, it's something deeper. He's invented the concept of the master of ceremonies as we know it today. Before Le Chat Noir, entertainment venues had performers, sure, but they didn't have someone whose job was to connect the acts, to interact with the audience, to create a narrative flow to the evening. Salis does all of this. He introduces performers, yes, but he also tells stories, makes political jokes, picks people out of the audience for attention. He's creating a sense that everyone in this room is part of the show. You're not just watching entertainment, you're participating in it. The waiters here are part of the performance too. They're dressed as members of the French Academy. You know, the Académie Française, that prestigious institution of old men who decide what counts as proper French language and culture. The waiters wear the Academy's formal green jackets with elaborate embroidery. It's mockery, pure and simple. The stuffy Academy members sitting in their official meetings across Paris, and here's a bunch of bohemians in Montmartre, dressing waiters in academy robes to serve cheap wine. One of these waiter academicians approaches your table now. He's carrying a tray loaded with drinks for other tables, but he pauses to take your order. His expression is deadpan serious, as if serving absinthe and beer is the most important scholarly work imaginable. You order something, let's say wine, the safe choice. He nods gravely and departs. The wine will arrive in a glass that doesn't match any other glass in the establishment. This is intentional. Salis claims that matching glassware is for people without imagination. Around you, more and more people are arriving. The 7 o'clock crowd is different from who'll be here at midnight. Right now it's students, young artists, people who need to be home at a reasonable hour because they have actual jobs tomorrow. The later crowd will include the courtesans, the wealthy slummers, the people for whom night is just beginning when others are going to bed. But even now you can feel something happening. There's an energy in the room that's hard to describe. It's expectation, maybe. Possibility. The sense that anything could happen tonight. Someone could debut a poem that changes French literature, or pick a fight that ends in a duel at dawn, or fall in love across a crowded table, or just get magnificently drunk and wake up tomorrow remembering nothing. All of it is valid. All of it is part of what Le Chat Noir offers. On the walls the gas lamps flicker. The real cats prowl between tables, sometimes jumping up to investigate drinks or steal bits of food. Salis is circulating now, moving from table to table, adjusting his performance based on his audience. With the artists, he's one of them, discussing technique, arguing about aesthetics. With the wealthy patrons, he's the court jester, entertaining but also subtly making fun of them. Your wine arrives. It's decent. Not great, but decent. Salis isn't trying to run a gourmand restaurant. The drinks are almost beside the point. What you're really paying for is the atmosphere, the sense of being somewhere that matters, somewhere that's creating the future of art and culture, even if it looks like a chaotic mess right now. Because here's the secret that's slowly becoming clear as you sit here. Sipping wine in this crowded, smoky room, Le Chat Noir isn't just a cabaret. It's an experiment in social mixing that shouldn't work but does. The rigid class structure of Paris should make this impossible. Artists and aristocrats don't socialize. The respectable and the scandalous don't share tables. But here, somehow they do. Why? How? Partly it's Salis's genius for making everyone feel simultaneously special and mocked. Partly it's the lure of authenticity. Wealthy people crave the real bohemian experience, and artists need wealthy patrons. But mostly, I think, it's because Le Chat Noir offers something Paris desperately needs, a space where the rules can be temporarily suspended, where you can be whoever you want to be for a few hours, where the future feels possible. The piano player has shifted into something more energetic. A few people near the front are singing along, though not in any organised way. The conversations have reached that perfect volume, loud enough to feel alive, not so loud that you can't hear yourself think. And in about an hour, when the real performances start, when the shadow theatre lights up and the poets take their turn and the famous regulars make their entrances, this energy will build into something unforgettable. But we're not there yet. Right now we're in that golden hour between arrival and event, when everyone is settling in, when the absinthe is just starting to work its magic, when anything still seems possible. Take a moment. Look around. These people, some of them will be famous, some will die forgotten, most will be somewhere in between, but tonight in this room they're all part of something remarkable. And speaking of absinthe, do you see those bottles behind the bar, that distinctive green glass? That elaborate ritual about to begin at the table near the window, where a man is preparing his drink with the precision of a chemist? It's time we talked about the green fairy. Time we understood why this particular drink became synonymous with everything Belle Époque Paris represented: creativity, decadence, danger, and a kind of beautiful self-destruction. Because the story of absinthe is the story of this entire era, distilled down to a single glass of emerald liquids. Watch closely now, because what you're about to witness is a ritual, and I use that word deliberately. The man at the table by the window has just ordered absinthe, and he's preparing it with the kind of reverence some people reserve for religious ceremonies. He's not drinking it straight. Nobody drinks absinthe straight, not if they know what they're doing. What's happening instead is something almost hypnotic in its precision. The waiter has brought him a glass, not just any glass, but a special absinthe glass with a line marked on it, indicating exactly how much of the green liquid to pour. About 1 ounce, roughly 30 milliliters if we're being precise. The liquid itself catches the candlelight and seems to glow from within, this otherworldly emerald colour that doesn't look quite natural, because honestly it isn't. Above the glass, the waiter is positioning an absinthe spoon. It's not like a regular spoon, it's flat, perforated with decorative holes, looks almost like a tiny silver grill. On top of this spoon, he places a single cube of white sugar. And now comes the magic part. There's an absinthe fountain on the table, this beautiful glass contraption with multiple spigots filled with ice-cold water. The man opens one of the spigots, and water begins to drip. Not pour drip, 1 drop at a time falling onto the sugar cube, slowly dissolving it. The sweetened water falling through the perforated spoon into the green absinthe below. And as the water hits the absinthe, something extraordinary happens. The clear green liquid turns cloudy, opalescent, milky. The French have a word for this transformation. Louche. The louche. It's a chemical reaction, the water causing oils in the absinthe to precipitate out of solution. But watching it, you'd swear it was alchemy. The man waits, patient, the water drips steadily. 1 drop, 2 drops. The sugar cube is slowly disintegrating. The absinthe is gradually changing from emerald green to this pearlescent pale green that seems to capture all the gaslight in the room. This is going to take 5 minutes, maybe more. Nobody rushes the absinthe ritual. That would be like rushing meditation or art or making love. Some things demand their own time, so while we're waiting, let me tell you the story of how this drink, this specific drink in this specific glass, became the defining beverage of Belle Époque Paris. Because it's not what you think. Absinthe wasn't invented in Paris. It wasn't even invented in France. The modern version was created in Switzerland in the late 1700s by a Dr. Pierre Ordinaire. And yes, that was actually his name, which is almost too perfect. He was making it as medicine, using wormwood, anise, fennel, and a whole garden of other herbs. It was meant to cure stomach ailments. Then, in the 1830s, something changed. The French army started using absinthe as a malaria preventative for troops in Algeria. Soldiers would mix it with their water to kill bacteria. When those soldiers came home, they brought the taste with them. But absinthe didn't become fashionable until the 1860s, and it became truly ubiquitous in the 1880s and 90s. Why then? What changed? Phylloxera. Stay with me here because this matters. Phylloxera is a tiny insect, barely visible, that devastated French wine production starting in the 1860s. It attacked the roots of grapevines, killing them. By the 1880s, French wine production had dropped by over 60%. Wine, the everyday drink of France, the liquid woven into the fabric of French life, suddenly became expensive and scarce. But absinthe was made from herbs, not grapes. Absinthe production exploded. In 1874, France produced 700,000 litres of absinthe. By 1890, it was 9 million litres, and prices dropped accordingly. By the mid-1890s, you could buy a glass of absinthe for less than a glass of wine, so the workers started drinking it. The artists started drinking it. Everyone started drinking it. By 1895, this moment right now, l'heure verte, the green hour, has become a Parisian institution. Between 5 and 7 in the evening, cafes and cabarets fill with people performing the absinthe ritual. The man at the table is still waiting. The sugar cube is almost gone now, dissolved into sweetened water that's transforming the absinthe into something that looks like liquid pearl. He's watching the process with complete attention, as if nothing else in the crowded cabaret matters. Here's what's in absinthe, scientifically speaking. The base is wormwood, Artemisia absinthium in Latin. That's what gives it the distinctive bitter taste and crucially contains a chemical called thujone. Then there's green anise, giving it that licorice flavour, sweet fennel. Various other herbs depending on the distiller, hyssop, lemon balm, sometimes coriander. The alcohol content is high, typically 65 to 75% alcohol by volume. That's 130 to 150 proof if you're thinking in American terms. Stronger than whiskey, stronger than vodka. When you dilute it with water, you're bringing it down to something more drinkable, usually around 20 to 30% alcohol. But it's the thujone that's caused all the controversy. Throughout the Belle Époque and into the early 1900s, people blamed thujone for everything: hallucinations, madness, criminal behaviour, the decline of French society itself. And here's the fascinating part. They were mostly wrong. Modern chemical analysis has shown that the amount of thujone in absinthe, even historical absinthe from the 1890s, was relatively low. Not enough to cause hallucinations, the effects people experienced. That was mostly just getting extremely drunk on high-proof alcohol, combined with poor nutrition, possibly other health problems, and a hefty dose of cultural expectation. If you believe the green fairy will make you see things and then you drink the equivalent of 7 or 8 shots of very strong alcohol on an empty stomach, well, you're probably going to have an interesting evening. But it's the alcohol doing it, not magical properties of wormwood. Still, the myth persisted, and honestly, the myth made absinthe more popular, not less. Artists loved the idea that they were drinking something dangerous, something that opened doors to different perceptions. Oscar Wilde famously said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that after the first glass of absinthe, you see things as you wish they were. After the second, you see things as they are not. Finally, you see things as they really are, and that's the most horrible thing in the world. Wilde was being dramatic as usual, but he captured something true about why absinthe appealed to the artistic crowd. It wasn't really about the drink itself. It was about what the drink represented, a rejection of bourgeois sobriety, an embrace of altered states, a willingness to court danger for the sake of art. The man's absinthe is ready now. The sugar has completely dissolved. The water has stopped dripping. The drink in the glass is a cloudy pale green that seems to glow with its own light. He lifts it, inhales the aroma, anise, herbs, alcohol, and takes his first sip. Watch his face. There's a moment where his eyes close just briefly. Whether it's from the taste or from anticipation of the effect, you can't tell. Maybe he can't either. Now multiply this scene by hundreds, because at this exact moment, all across Paris, tens of thousands of people are performing this same ritual, in cafes along the boulevards, in working-class bistros in Belleville, in elegant salons in the Marais. The green hour is democratic. It happens everywhere, for everyone who can afford the 2 francs for a glass. But in Montmartre, in places like Le Chat Noir, the ritual takes on extra meaning. Here, absinthe isn't just a drink. it's a statement. It's how you signal that you're part of the bohemian world, that you reject conventional society, that you're willing to dance with danger. Let me tell you about some of the famous absinthe drinkers who've walked through this very cabaret. Paul Verlaine, the poet whose work we'll hear about later tonight, was so addicted to absinthe that his friends called it his green madness. He'd drink it for hours, glass after glass, until he could barely stand. His poetry is brilliant, haunting, musical, revolutionary. But his life was a disaster, and absinthe was a major part of that disaster. Vincent van Gogh, who lived in Paris from 1886 to 1888, working in Montmartre, drinking in these same cabarets, apparently consumed absinthe in quantities that worried even his heavy-drinking friends. Some art historians think you can see the influence in his paintings, especially the later ones with their swirling hallucinatory quality. Though again that might be epilepsy, mental illness, malnutrition, and lead poisoning from his paints as much as anything the absinthe was doing. Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, whose presence in Montmartre is so ubiquitous that you'll probably see him later tonight, allegedly carried a hollow walking stick filled with absinthe, so he could drink it anywhere. True story or myth? Probably a bit of both, but it tells you something about his reputation, and here's what strikes me as both funny and sad. These artists believed absinthe was helping them create. They genuinely thought the drink was opening doors in their minds, allowing them to see things others couldn't see, and maybe in a weird psychological way, it was, not through chemistry but through belief. If you think you're drinking creativity in a glass, you might give yourself permission to be more creative. But the cost was real. Verlaine died at 51, his health destroyed. Van Gogh died at 37. Toulouse-Lautrec made it to 36. Absinthe wasn't the only factor. Poverty, syphilis, mental illness, general lack of healthcare all played roles. But the drink certainly didn't help. A woman has just ordered absinthe at a nearby table. She's alone, which is unusual enough to attract glances. She's well dressed, but not ostentatiously so, and there's something about the way she handles the ritual, confidently, precisely, that suggests she's done this many times before. She catches you looking and raises her glass slightly in acknowledgement before taking a sip. Who is she? A courtesan between appointments? An actress from one of the Montmartre theatres? A bourgeois woman slumming for the evening? You'll never know, and that's part of the appeal. Absinthe culture creates these moments of equality. For the duration of the green hour, everyone is just someone drinking, just someone performing the same ritual. The chemistry of absinthe is actually fascinating beyond the Thujone controversy. The louche effect, that clouding we watched earlier, happens because absinthe contains compounds called terpenes that are soluble in alcohol but not in water. When you add water, these compounds precipitate out, forming tiny droplets suspended in the liquid. That's what creates the cloudiness and releases the aromatic compounds that give absinthe its distinctive smell. Different absinthes louche differently. A high-quality absinthe will louche smoothly, evenly, creating a stable emulsion. A poor-quality one might separate or look grainy. The colour can range from pale green to almost white, depending on the herbs used and how it was made. And yes, there were plenty of poor-quality absinthes on the market. By the 1890s, with demand so high, some manufacturers were cutting corners, using copper salts to create that green colour instead of proper herbs, adding toxic additives to strengthen the effect. These industrial absinthes, the cheap stuff sold in working-class neighbourhoods, those actually were dangerous, but not because of the wormwood, because they were literally poisonous. The absinthe served at Le Chat Noir is mid-range quality, not the finest, that's reserved for exclusive salons and wealthy private homes, but not the toxic sludge from the cheap cafes either. Salis knows his clientele. Artists want authentic absinthe, not coloured alcohol. Wealthy slummers want to feel bohemian, but not to the point of actual illness. Price-wise, a glass of decent absinthe here will cost you about 2 francs. That's roughly what a working man earns in half a day. For the context, a simple meal might cost 1 franc. A room for the night in a cheap hotel, 3 francs. So absinthe isn't cheap, but it's accessible if you're willing to make it your priority, and many people do. There are workers who'll skip lunch to afford their evening absinthe. Artists who'll paint all day without eating so they can drink all night. The drink has that kind of hold on people. The ritual itself, the slow drip of water, the transformation of the liquid, the deliberate patience required, all of this is part of the appeal. In a world that's increasingly industrialized, increasingly rushed, the absinthe ritual forces you to slow down, to pay attention, to treat drinking not as mere consumption, but as an experience. Think about that for a moment. We live in an age of fast everything. Fast food, fast communication, instant gratification. But in 1895 Paris, at least in the realm of absinthe, slow is sacred. The 5 minutes you spend preparing your drink is meditation, is anticipation, is art. Several tables around you now have their own absinthe fountains going, water dripping steadily, green liquid turning milky. The sound of the water drops becomes part of the ambient noise of the cabaret, a soft, irregular percussion underneath the conversation and piano music. Someone near the back has just received their absinthe and, inexperienced, is trying to drink it without the water ritual. You can see the grimace from here. Straight absinthe tastes like medicine. Bitter, harsh, overwhelming. The waiter is rushing over, gently taking the glass back, explaining the proper method. The customer looks embarrassed, but also relieved. It's a common mistake among first-timers. The woman who toasted you earlier has finished her glass. She's signalling for another. 2 glasses means she's settling in for the evening. 3 or more means she's chasing something, forgetfulness, inspiration, oblivion. You hope it's one of the first 2. As the green hour deepens into the evening, the absinthe takes hold of the room. Not dramatically, this isn't the stuff of hallucinations and fairy sightings, remember, but gradually the edges of the world soften slightly. Conversations flow more freely. Laughter comes easier. The distance between strangers shrinks. The man at the window is on his 2nd glass now. His gestures are slightly looser, his smile slightly wider. He's talking to someone at the next table, someone he didn't know 20 minutes ago. That's the absinthe working, or maybe that's just human nature lubricated with alcohol and sugar and the permission to be someone different for a few hours. And now, as the clock edges toward 8, as the green hour gives way to the evening's planned entertainment, something else is beginning to happen. Lights are being adjusted at the front of the room. A screen is being set up. People are shifting their chairs, angling for better views, because the shadow theatre is about to begin. And if you think the absinthe ritual was magical, wait until you see what Henri Rivière and his team have created. Wait until you understand how zinc cutouts and coloured glass and electric light can tell stories that will stay with you long after the absinthe has worn off. The lights are dimming now, and a hush falls over Le Chat Noir that feels almost sacred. Conversations drop to whispers. Chairs scrape as people reposition themselves. Someone coughs, and 3 people shush them immediately. Because what's about to happen is not just entertainment, it's the reason Le Chat Noir became legendary throughout Europe. At the front of the room, a large rectangular screen has been set up. It's white, translucent, stretched tight in an ornate wooden frame that must be 3 feet high and 4 feet wide. Behind it you can see shadows moving, technicians preparing, though you can't make out details yet. The screen glows faintly from lights positioned behind it, waiting. Rodolphe Salle has taken his position to the side of the screen. He's holding a manuscript, but you get the sense he barely needs it. He's performed this routine hundreds of times. His voice, when he speaks, has changed. Gone is the mocking, satirical tone from earlier. This is serious Salis, theatrical Salis, the ringmaster presenting his greatest attraction. "Ladies and gentlemen," he begins, his voice carrying to the back of the crowded room, "what you are about to witness is a spectacle unique in all the world. Poetry, music, light, artistry combined into something that has never existed before this very cabaret invented it. I present to you the Shadow Theatre of Le Chat Noir." And with that, the gas lamps go out completely. Total darkness. For just a moment you can hear people breathing, the scrape of a match as someone tries to light a cigarette and is immediately shushed. Then from behind the screen a light blooms. Electric light. Still a relative novelty in 1895 Paris. Bright, steady and focused. And onto the screen comes the first shadow. It's a silhouette of a cathedral, impossibly detailed. You can see individual spires, Gothic arches, flying buttresses. It's not just a crude outline, it's architectural precision rendered in light and shadow. The cathedral seems to float in the white space of the screen, three-dimensional despite being completely flat. Behind you, someone gasps softly. Even though shadow theatre isn't new to the world, it's existed in Asia for centuries, in Europe since the 1700s. What Le Chat Noir has done with it is revolutionary. Let me take you back for a moment, because the story of how this theatre was born is almost as magical as the performances themselves. It started almost by accident in 1885. A painter named Henri Somme and an illustrator named George Auriol built a small puppet theatre here at Le Chat Noir. Just for fun, really. Puppets for adults, satirical little shows. Nothing groundbreaking. Then one evening, Henri Rivière, a young painter, 21 years old at the time, working as Salis's assistant, was watching the puppet theatre. And he had an idea. What if instead of puppets they used shadows? What if they put a white cloth in front of the puppet stage and lit figures from behind? He grabbed a napkin, literally a white napkin from one of the tables, stretched it across the puppet theatre opening. Then he cut a simple figure out of cardboard, held it behind the napkin with a light source, and moved it while his friend Jules Jouy sang and played piano. The audience went silent. Then they erupted in applause. That was the first shadow play at Le Chat Noir. A napkin and a cardboard cutout. But Rivière saw the potential immediately. Within 2 years, he transformed that crude experiment into what you're watching now. The napkin became a professionally manufactured screen, 1 meter tall and perfectly translucent. The cardboard figures became silhouettes cut from zinc. Zinc doesn't bend or warp, holds its shape, creates sharp shadows. The single light became multiple electric lights with coloured filters. The one-person operation became a team of 8 to 12 operators working in precise coordination. On the screen now, the cathedral silhouette has been joined by others. A forest appears, trees layered at different depths to create perspective. Then figures. Pilgrims walking, their movement fluid and lifelike. How are they doing this? Behind that screen, in a space barely deep enough for humans to work, there are operators holding zinc silhouettes on thin rods, moving them across the screen at different distances from the light source. Closer to the light means larger, hazier shadows. Closer to the screen means smaller, sharper ones. By moving figures at different depths, they create the illusion of three-dimensional space, but it gets more complex. Some of the zinc cutouts have movable parts, articulated arms, legs, heads. The operators can make figures walk, gesture, bow. It requires incredible precision. Miss your timing by a second and the illusion shatters. And then there's the colour, because yes, there's colour in these shadows. You can see it now. The sky behind the cathedral is shifting from white to pale blue. The forest has touches of green. How? Between the lights and the zinc figures, there are sheets of coloured glass and coloured silk. As the story progresses, operators slide different coloured filters into place, painting the shadows with hue. A red filter for sunset, blue for night, green for forest. The effect is subtle but transformative. The music starts. A piano. You recognise it as the same out-of-tune upright from earlier. But somehow in this context, the imperfect tuning adds character. The pianist is playing something original, composed specifically for this show. The melody is haunting, medieval-sounding, matching the Gothic imagery on screen. Salis begins to narrate. He's reading from his manuscript now, but his delivery is so polished it sounds spontaneous. He's telling the story of pilgrims journeying to a distant shrine, encountering obstacles, temptations, wonders. His voice rises and falls with the action on screen, perfectly timed. On the screen a storm approaches. Clouds, layers of zinc cutouts with holes punched through them to suggest texture, roll across the sky. Lightning flashes, created by briefly brightening the light source. The pilgrims huddle together, their shadows clustered. And here's what's remarkable. Despite knowing exactly how this is done, despite understanding it's just metal cutouts and electric lights and clever manipulation, you're transported. The illusion works. Your brain fills in the gaps, creates a narrative, invests in these characters who are literally nothing but shadows. This particular show tonight is called La Marche à l'Étoile, The March to the Star. It premiered in 1890 and has been performed hundreds of times since. It's based on Mystery Play, a medieval religious drama running about 45 minutes with 10 different tableaus or scenes. The story follows pilgrims seeking the Star of Bethlehem, encountering various biblical and allegorical figures along the way. It's explicitly Christian in content, which is ironic given that Salis explicitly bans priests from his cabaret. But the shadow theatre gives him cover. He can claim it's art, satire, cultural commentary, which, to be fair, it is. Georges Fragerol wrote the music and the story. Henri Rivière created the visual design, and dozens of other artists contributed, cutting the zinc figures, painting the coloured filters, designing the sets. Le Chanois' shadow theatre is collaborative art in the truest sense. On screen, an angel appears. It's breathtaking. Wings spread wide, maybe 2 feet across, every feather individually cut into the zinc. The angel's robes flow as if in wind, achieved through multiple overlapping cutouts moved in sequence. The figure seems to float, descending from the top of the screen toward the pilgrims below. Behind the screen, you know there must be an operator holding that angel figure on a long rod, carefully lowering it while another operator moves the pilgrims, while another adjusts the coloured filters, while another prepares the next scene. All of this coordinated without the audience seeing any of it. Just the shadows, just the story. The technical achievement is staggering when you really think about it. Remember, cinema doesn't exist yet. The Lumiere brothers won't have their first public film screening until December this year, 1895, just a few weeks from now. Photography exists, but moving pictures, the only moving pictures anyone's ever seen are shadow plays like this one. So in a very real sense, you're watching the birth of cinema. The same principles, movement, light, narrative, the illusion of depth, all being worked out here in a smoky cabaret in Montmartre. In 20 years, film will dominate, but right now, right this moment, shadow theatre is the cutting edge of visual storytelling. The show continues. The pilgrims reach a city. Intricate architecture rises on the screen. Castles and towers, all perfectly proportioned. They encounter temptations. A feast appears, food and wine that looks almost edible despite being flat zinc cutouts. Some pilgrims falter, others press on. Salis's narration weaves through it all. He's not just describing what you're seeing, he's adding commentary, making jokes, breaking the fourth wall occasionally to remind you this is performance. When a pilgrim succumbs to temptation, Salis ad-libs. "Ah yes, we've all been there, haven't we? One glass of wine leads to another, leads to waking up in a strange bed wondering what happened to your trousers." Laughter ripples through the audience, but it doesn't break the spell. If anything, it deepens it. This mixing of the sacred and profane, the serious and comic, is pure le chat noir. The quality of the shadows is extraordinary. Modern scholarship has examined the surviving zinc figures from Le Chat Noir's shadow theatre. Yes, some still exist, preserved in museums, and they're works of art in their own right. Some are incredibly complex, with dozens of tiny cuts creating texture and detail. One figure of a cathedral has over 300 individual windows cut into it, each one allowing light through in a precise pattern, and the operators had to memorize all of this. Which figure went where, when to move it, how fast, at what depth. There are no screens showing them what the audience sees. They're working blind, trusting their training and the narration to keep them synchronized. Think about that level of coordination. 8 to 12 people in a cramped space behind a screen, manipulating heavy zinc figures, changing colored filters, adjusting lights, all while staying completely silent so the audience doesn't hear them. One mistake, one collision, one dropped figure, and the entire illusion collapses. Yet night after night they pull it off. On screen now, the pilgrims are approaching their destination. A star appears at the top of the screen, not the Star of Bethlehem, but its medieval representation, a geometric pattern of light created by a zinc cutout, with a complex arrangement of holes and a coloured filter behind it. It rotates slowly, mesmerising. The music swells. The piano is joined by someone humming harmonies from the audience. This happens sometimes, regulars who know the show by heart adding their voices. Salis doesn't stop them. This is communal art, participatory art. The pilgrims reach the star. They kneel. You can see their silhouette is changing shape, the articulated figures being manipulated to show genuflection. Light blooms around them, created by briefly removing a filter and letting pure white electric light flood through. It's the moment of transcendence, of spiritual revelation. And despite the technical knowledge, despite the absinthe wearing off, despite your modern cynicism, you feel something. The beauty of the image, the culmination of the narrative, the sheer artistry of making meaning from nothing but light and shadow. It lands, the music resolves, the image fades, the lights slowly come back up in the cabaret. For a moment silence, then applause, genuine and sustained. People are standing, raising their glasses. Salis is bowing, gesturing to the screen behind which the operators are emerging, sweaty and exhausted. They bow too. The pianist stands and takes his applause. You glance at your pocket watch. The show ran 35 minutes, though it felt like both longer and shorter simultaneously. That's the mark of good art. It distorts time. Around you, people are talking animatedly. Some are critics. You can tell by the notebooks they are pulling out, scribbling observations. Others are just enthusiastic audience members, debating the symbolism, the technique, whether tonight's performance was better or worse than the last time they saw it. But here's something you might not know. The Shadow Theatre of Le Chat Noir toured. Starting in 1892, Salis took the whole operation on the road. The screen, the zinc figures, the lights, the operators, everything. They performed in provinces across France, in Belgium, in Tunisia, in Algeria, bringing this peculiar Montmartre invention to people who'd never seen anything like it. The posters advertising these tours, designed by Théophile Steinlen, became iconic in themselves. You've probably seen them, a black cat stylized and elegant with glowing yellow eyes. Those posters now hang in museums. They're worth thousands of dollars. But in 1895 they were just advertisements for a travelling shadow show. The operators are packing up their equipment now, carefully wrapping the zinc figures in cloth, dismantling the screen. These figures are valuable, not in monetary terms, but artistically. Each one represents hours of pre-and cutting work. They're stored in special boxes, catalogued, cared for like the artworks they are. Some regulars are approaching the operators, asking questions about technique. The operators answer patiently, though they're clearly exhausted. This is the other side of Belle Époque artistry, the labour, the physical toll, the repetition. They'll perform this same show again in 2 nights, and again 2 nights after that, dozens of times per month. But Le Chat Noir has other shadow plays in its repertoire. L'Épopée about Napoleon's campaigns, Le Sphinx set in ancient Egypt, Elsewhere by Fernand Fau, a science fiction piece about space travel. Over 40 different productions were created here between 1887 and 1897. Some ran for years, others flopped after one performance. The Shadow Theatre made Le Chat Noir internationally famous. Critics from London, Berlin, New York came to see it. Artists studied it, tried to replicate it. But nobody ever quite captured the magic that Rivière and Célis created here. Why? What was the secret ingredient? Maybe it was the collaboration. Artists from different disciplines working together with ego subordinated to the final product. Maybe it was the setting, the intimate space of the cabaret making the audience feel part of something exclusive. Maybe it was the Montmartre spirit itself, that willingness to experiment, to risk failure, to try things that shouldn't work but somehow do. Or maybe, honestly, it was just good timing, the right innovation at the right moment in the right place. The screen is down now, packed away. The space at the front of the room is empty again. The show is over, but the evening is just beginning. It's almost 9 o'clock and Le Chat Noir is filling up with the late crowd. The door keeps opening, bringing blasts of cold November air and new arrivals. And among those new arrivals, pushing through the crowd with the confidence of someone who belongs here, is a woman who's about to shift the entire energy of the room. She's beautiful in a way that seems almost dangerous. Her dress is expensive but worn with calculated carelessness. Men's eyes track her movement. Women's eyes assess and dismiss her in the same glance. She's a courtesan, one of the grands horizontales, though you don't know her name yet, and her presence here means the night is about to enter a different phase entirely, one where art gives way to commerce, where beauty becomes currency, where the demi-monde reveals itself in all its glittering, tragic complexity. She doesn't walk into the room, she makes an entrance. There's a difference, and everyone here knows it. The conversations don't stop exactly, but they shift. Men glance up from their drinks. Women lean closer to their companions, whispering. Even Salis, who pretends to be unimpressed by everything, straightens slightly and adjusts his ridiculous hat. Because when a high-class courtesan enters Le Chat Noir, the entire social dynamic recalibrates. Her dress is worth noticing. It's not the most expensive thing in the room. There are bankers' wives here wearing gowns that cost more, but there's a difference between expensive and strategic. Her dress is emerald silk that catches the gaslight like water, cut to show her shoulders and the suggestion of more. Not scandalous enough to be vulgar, but definitely calculated to attract attention. The colour alone tells you something. Emeralds, jewels, luxury. She's wearing her profession like armour. Her hair is piled high in the latest fashion, held with what looks like a pearl comb. Real pearls, probably. A gift from someone wealthy. Her jewellery is understated. Single strand of pearls, small earrings. The restraint is strategic too. She's not trying to look rich. She's trying to look like someone who doesn't need to try. She scans the room with the practiced eye of someone evaluating opportunities. Her gaze lingers on certain tables, older men, well-dressed, alone or with other men, potential clients. Then she moves to a table that's recently emptied, sits with perfect posture, and signals the waiter. Within seconds, a glass of champagne appears. Not absinthe. Courtesans drink champagne. It's part of the image. Let me tell you about the world she inhabits because it's one of the most fascinating and misunderstood aspects of Belle Époque Paris. The French have a term for it, le demi-monde, the half-world, coined by Alexandre Dumas-Fils, son of the famous Dumas who wrote The Three Musketeers, in his 1855 play of the same name. The demi-monde exists between respectable society and the underworld of common prostitution. It's populated by courtesans, kept women, actresses, dancers, and the men who support them. But here's what most people get wrong. The demi-monde isn't just about sex. It's about money, yes, power, absolutely. But it's also about ambition, survival, and a kind of desperate social climbing that happens in the margins of acceptable society. Think of it this way. In 1895 Paris, women have essentially 4 respectable options: marry well, become a nun, work as a governess or teacher, or hope wealthy relatives support them. That's it. No voting rights, no property rights once married, no access to most professions. The law literally treats women as perpetual minors needing male guardianship. So what does a beautiful, intelligent, ambitious woman do if she's born poor? If she starts life as a seamstress in the Marais, making 2 francs a day in a cold workshop? If marriage to a shopkeeper or labourer means a life of drudgery, poverty, and endless childbearing? Some choose the demi-monde, and the ones who succeed, the grande horizontale, the grand courtesan, they achieve a kind of power that even wealthy married women never touch. The courtesan at the table has been approached by a man. He's well-dressed, probably mid-40s, definitely wealthy based on his watch chain alone. He bows slightly, asks something. She considers, then gestures to the empty chair. He sits. The waiter immediately brings him champagne without being asked. This is clearly not their first meeting. Now watch how she works. She's leaning forward slightly, engaged but not desperate, laughing at something he says but not too enthusiastically, touching his arm briefly then withdrawing. She became a chorus girl at small theatres, which got her more noticed. By her mid-20s she'd attracted her first serious patron, a wealthy prince who set her up in an apartment. Then another patron, wealthier still. By the late 1870s, she owned, not rented, owned, her own hotel particulier on Boulevard Malesherbes, a mansion, servants, a state bed designed by a famous furniture maker that became so famous that tourists would ask to see it, like it was a monument. When Valtès died in 1910, she left an estate worth hundreds of thousands of francs. From rape victim at 13 to wealthy property owner at 60. Through sex work, yes, but also through incredible business acumen, strategic relationship management, and sheer force of will. The courtesan and her companion are deep in conversation now. You can't hear what they're saying, but you can read the body language. He's interested, but playing it cool. She's receptive, but not committed. They're negotiating, though the negotiation is disguised as flirtation. Here's how the economics of high-end courtesanship worked in 1895. At the bottom, street prostitutes might charge 1 to 5 francs per encounter. They worked volume, multiple clients per night, in dangerous conditions with no protection. Many died young from disease, violence, or suicide. Mid-level prostitutes working in brothels charged 5 to 20 francs. Better conditions, regular health inspections mandated by law. but still essentially trapped by economics and social stigma. Kept women, lorettes they were called, had single protectors who covered rent and living expenses, maybe 200 to 500 francs per month. Comfortable but precarious. If the protector lost interest or money, you were back to nothing. But grandes horizontales, the top courtesans, they operated on an entirely different scale. A top courtesan might have her residence paid for, 3,000 francs per month for a fashionable apartment. Servants paid for, another 1,000 per month. Wardrobe allowance could easily be 20,000 francs per year for the clothing alone, because she had to look the part everywhere she went. Jewellery, horses and carriages, opera boxes, vacation homes. The man wasn't buying sex. Any man could buy sex for 5 francs. He was buying the fantasy of access, of exclusivity, of being seen with this desirable woman, of the prestige that came with supporting a famous courtesan. It was social capital as much as sexual transaction, and the successful courtesans understood this perfectly. They cultivated mystery, maintained multiple protectors simultaneously, played them against each other to drive up their value. They invested their money, real estate, stocks, bonds. They planned for the future because they knew beauty was temporary. The woman at the table has just declined something. You see her shake her head, smile, but the answer is clearly no. The man looks disappointed but not surprised. He tries again, different approach. She listens, considers, power dynamics playing out in real time. Let me tell you about the 3 most famous courtesans of the 1890s. Les Grandes Trois they were called, the Great Three. First, Liane de Pougy, born Anne-Marie Chassaigne in 1869, married young to an abusive naval officer, fled to Paris with nothing, became a dancer at the Folies Bergères, then transitioned to full-time courtesanship. Her signature move, showing up at high society events wearing millions of francs worth of jewellery gifted by her various protectors, literally dripping with diamonds and pearls, upstaging all the respectable wives. She had affairs with everyone who was anyone, princes, politicians, industrialists, but she was also openly bisexual at a time when that was scandalous even in the permissive demi-monde. Her affair with American writer Natalie Clifford Barney became semi-public after Barney literally dressed as a page boy and appeared at Liane's performances declaring herself a messenger from Sappho. Second, Caroline Otero, La Belle Otero, Spanish dancer, illegitimate daughter of a Greek nobleman and a gypsy, started her career at 12. By her 20s in Paris she was legendary. Dark-haired, passionate, temperamental, known for literally dancing on tables at Maxim's restaurant. Her performances so sensual that supposedly every man in the room felt she was dancing specifically for him. She and Liane de Pougy hated each other, bitter rivals. Once, supposedly, they both showed up at the same event wearing all their jewellery, trying to outshine each other. The newspapers covered it like a sporting event. 2 women who'd clawed their way up from nothing, fighting for dominance in a world that would happily destroy them both. Third, Emilienne d'Alençon, started as a circus acrobat, transitioned to cabaret performer, then courtesan. Her specialty? Exotic animals. She kept a lion cub as a pet, walked it on a leash through Paris, owned multiple exotic birds, snakes, a panther. The animals were publicity, making her memorable, making her brand stand out. When you have 300 courtesans in Paris, you need a gimmick. These 3 women, Liane, Caroline, Emilienne, they weren't victims, or rather, they started as victims but refused to stay victims. They took the only power available to women in their positions and wielded it like weapons. They became wealthy, they became famous. Their names were in newspapers alongside politicians and artists, but the cost was enormous. They could never be truly respectable. Married women wouldn't socialize with them except occasionally in secret. Their relationships were always transactional, even when they involved genuine affection. They aged out of the profession, beauty fades, and younger competitors constantly emerged. Many ended up poor despite years of wealth, having spent everything on maintaining the lifestyle their profession demanded, and the double standard was crushing. The men who supported them faced no social consequences, but the courtesans, they were celebrated and condemned simultaneously, desired and despised, living glamorous lives everyone wanted to see but no one wanted to acknowledge. The woman at the table stands now, the man stands with her, they're leaving together, presumably to somewhere more private. As they pass your table, you see her face up close for the first time. She's younger than you thought, maybe 25, but there's something old in her eyes. The look of someone who's learned too much too fast about how the world really works. The truth is, most courtesans weren't the famous three. Most were women like Valtess started out, poor, desperate, doing what they had to do to survive, and maybe, if luck and ruthlessness aligned, thrive. There's a woman named Marthe de Florian, not famous like the Grandes Trois, but successful in her own right. In 1910 she'll die and leave her Paris apartment to her granddaughter, who'll flee when the Nazis invade in 1940 and never return. That apartment will stay locked, untouched, for 70 years. When it finally opens in 2010, it'll be a time capsule, Marthe's possessions exactly as she left them, including love letters from wealthy protectors, artwork painted of her, evidence of a life lived in Belle Époque luxury. The discovery will make international news. People will marvel at the preserved beauty, but I wonder if they'll really understand what they're seeing. Not just art and furniture, but evidence of a system that forced women to monetize their beauty and sexuality because every other path to security was closed to them. Another courtesan has entered Le Chat Noir now. Different style. She's going for artistic rather than glamorous. Bohemian dress, less jewellery, but still clearly part of the demimonde. She's heading for a table of painters in the back, men she probably knows personally. Maybe she models for them, maybe more. The boundaries blur. Because here's something important. The line between artist's model, mistress and courtesan was porous. Many women occupied multiple categories simultaneously. They'd model during the day, attend the opera as someone's companion at night, maintain a separate relationship with a regular protector, and still have genuine romantic feelings for someone who couldn't afford to support them. The emotional complexity of these lives, is staggering when you really think about it. Imagine performing desire and affection for money, while trying to maintain authentic relationships somewhere in the gaps. Imagine the self-division required, the psychological cost of treating your own body as your primary asset. Some women went mad, literally. The demimonde was full of stories of courtesans who had cracked under the pressure, dramatic public breakdowns, suicide attempts, retreats into drug addiction or alcoholism. Others survived by becoming hard, treating everything transactionally, trusting no one, building walls between their professional and private selves that nothing could penetrate. And a very few, managed to navigate it with some humanity intact, found protectors who genuinely cared about them, saved their money and invested wisely, eventually transitioned to something more stable, marriage to a tolerant man, retirement on accumulated wealth, reinvention in a new city where the past could be forgotten. The room has fully transformed now. What was an artistic cabaret 2 hours ago is becoming something else. A marketplace, though nobody would call it that. Every interaction is layered with possibility, negotiation, the complex dance of the demimonde. Even Salis, who mocks everything, treats the courtesans with a kind of grudging respect. They're honest about what they are, which is more than you can say for many of the respectable people who condemn them. They are survivors in a system rigged against them, and they're funding his cabaret, buying expensive champagne, bringing in wealthy men who buy more drinks. Economics and morality intertwine in ways that make simple judgments impossible. The piano starts up again. Someone's singing now, a popular chanson about love and loss. The courtesan in the artistic dress joins in, her voice surprisingly beautiful. For a moment, the transactional nature of everything fades. It's just music, just people singing together in a warm room on a cold November night. But the moment passes, reality reasserts itself. Money changes hands at the bar, meaningful glances cross the room. Plans are made for later. This is the demi-monde. Beautiful and tragic, empowering and exploitative. A world where women carved out power in a system designed to deny them any. But the power came at a cost that's hard to calculate in mere francs. And speaking of those who paid the price, the artists who documented this world, there's someone you need to meet. Someone who's probably here tonight, in fact, sitting at his usual table with his usual drink. A man whose paintings would make these courtesans and this cabaret world famous, even as his own life spiraled into darkness. Look there, near the back corner. Do you see him? The short man with pince-nez glasses, sketchpad already out, capturing everything with quick, sure strokes. That's Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, and his story, his relationship with this world of dancers and courtesans and absinthe-soaked nights, that's where we're heading next. There he is. Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec sits at a corner table, and the first thing you notice, you can't help but notice, is his height. Or rather the lack of it. He's 31 years old but could pass for older, with a full beard and that particular weariness that comes from chronic pain and too much alcohol. When he stands, which he's doing now to greet someone, you can see he's maybe 4 feet 11 inches tall. His legs are disproportionately short, his torso almost normal-sized, giving him an appearance that people stare at even in a place like Le Chat Noir, where staring is generally considered rude. 2 broken legs, that's what did it. When Henri was 13, he fell and broke his left femur. At 14, he fell again and broke his right. The bones never healed properly, never grew properly, leaving him with this twisted, painful body that would define his entire existence. But watch his hands. Those hands are steady, precise, moving across the sketchpad with absolute confidence. He's drawing a woman at the bar, catching her profile in maybe 20 quick strokes. The line is so sure, so economical. No hesitation. This is someone who's drawn thousands, maybe tens of thousands of figures, until the translation from eye to hand happens almost faster than thought. He glances up, sees you looking, raises his glass in a kind of sardonic salute. There's absinthe in that glass, of course. There's always absinthe in Toulouse-Lautrec's glass. Someone once calculated that he drank approximately 5 litres of alcohol per day during his peak Montmartre years. 5 litres, that's over a gallon. It's functionally impossible, but somehow he managed it. Let me tell you about Henri-Marie Raymond de Toulouse-Lautrec Montfort, because yes, that's his full name, and yes, that hyphenated aristocratic mouthful tells you everything about where he came from and how far he fell or climbed, depending on your perspective. Born November 1864 in Albi, southern modern France, into one of the oldest noble families in the country, his father, Count Alphonse, and his mother, Countess Adele, were first cousins. That inbreeding, common among aristocracy trying to keep bloodlines pure and money in the family, likely caused Henri's bone disease, a genetic disorder called pycnodysostosис, though they didn't know that in 1864. They just knew something was wrong with the boy's bones. His childhood was spent in chateau, educated by private tutors, learning to ride and hunt like proper nobility. Then the falls happened and everything changed. The teenager who should have been managing estates and continuing the family line was suddenly a cripple. Their word, not mine, but that's how they thought of him. His father was ashamed, stopped visiting. His mother was devoted but helpless. So Henri turned to art. If he couldn't ride horses, he could draw them. If he couldn't participate in aristocratic society, he could observe it. He moved to Paris in 1882, studied under academic painters, learned proper technique, and then, crucially, he discovered Montmartre. The Montmartre of 1885, when Lautrec first started coming here regularly, was where he found his subjects. Not the sanitized, idealized classical subjects his academic teachers preferred. Real people, prostitutes, dancers, drunks, outcasts, people who didn't care that he was short or aristocratic or drunk, people who accepted him because in Montmartre everyone was damaged in some way. He's switched subjects now, drawing a couple near the window, catching the intimacy of their bent heads, the way their hands almost but don't quite touch. You can see him smiling slightly as he works. This is what he loves, these unguarded human moments, the reality beneath the performance. His technique is distinctive. No preliminary sketches usually. He draws directly, trusts his eye and hand completely. He uses lithography for his posters, the cutting-edge printing technique that allows for bold colours and mass production. But here, now, it's just charcoal on paper, fast and fluid. The posters are what made him famous. You've probably seen them even if you don't realise it. Moulin Rouge, La Goulou, from 1891, that iconic image of the dancer with her leg raised high, silhouettes of crowd in the foreground. That poster changed everything. Before Lautrec, posters were just advertisements. He made them art. He did it through radical composition. Look at that La Goulou poster, the way he crops the figures, puts the viewer right in the scene, uses flat colours and bold outlines influenced by Japanese prints. It doesn't look like traditional European art, it looks modern, immediate, alive. And he did it by treating his subjects with unusual dignity. La Goulou in his posters isn't idealized into some classical beauty. She's herself, fleshy, energetic, real. The other dancers he painted, Jane Avril, Yvette Gilbert, they're individuals, not types. He captured what made them unique instead of making them conform to some artistic ideal of femininity. Why? Why did an aristocrat from one of France's oldest families choose to spend every night in cabarets, drinking with prostitutes and painting dancers? Partly, probably, because he identified with them. He was an outcast too. His body made him a spectacle, something people stared at and pitied. The women of Montmartre didn't pity him. They treated him like everyone else. In the brothels, yes, he practically lived in brothels for years. He was just another customer, just another man. His money was as good as anyone's, and his disability didn't matter. But there's something deeper, I think. Lautrec genuinely saw beauty in the reality of these lives. Not romanticized beauty, not the beauty of perfection, the beauty of truth, of movement, of personality expressing itself without the constraints of respectability. Look at his painting, At the Moulin Rouge, The Dance from 1890. You can see it in museums now, but imagine encountering it when it was new. There's La Goulou dancing with Valentin le Dessaussé, the boneless one, so called because he could bend in impossible ways. But look at the background. See how Lautrec captured the actual lighting of the cabaret, the way gaslight makes everyone look slightly yellow and tired. See the woman in the foreground whose face is bizarrely lit, almost green, slightly distorted. Critics called it ugly. They said he was deliberately making beautiful subjects hideous. But he wasn't. He was painting what he actually saw, the harsh lighting, the fatigue beneath the performance, the reality of working-class entertainment. No one had painted this truthfully before. He's finished his sketch now, tears the page from his pad with a practiced motion, and hands it to the couple he was drawing. They are delighted. A Toulouse-Lautrec original. He waves off their thanks, already starting something new. This generosity was typical. He gave away hundreds, maybe thousands of drawings, to friends, to dancers, to random people who caught his interest. His relationship with Jane Averill was particularly close. Jane was different from the other dancers, more refined, more neurotic, less overtly sexual. She'd spent time in an asylum as a teenager, suffered from nervous disorders, and danced, she said, to release the tension in her body. Lautrec understood that. His body was prison too in its own way. He made multiple posters for her. The most famous shows her in profile, one leg raised, black silk stockings visible, her face pensive rather than seductive. It made her career, that poster. Before it, she was just another dancer. After it, she was Jane Averill, the mysterious, melancholic can-can girl that everyone wanted to see. Did they have a romantic relationship? Probably not physical. His disability and alcoholism made that difficult. But there was intimacy there, the kind that comes from really seeing and being seen. She was one of the few people who visited him in the asylum during his final breakdown. That tells you something. Because yes, this brilliant, talented man who's sitting here drawing with such confidence is going to be dead in 6 years. July 1901, just before his 37th birthday. Syphilis, alcoholism, probably other complications from his genetic condition. He'll die at his mother's chateau, the same place he grew up, having come full circle from aristocratic childhood to bohemian career to aristocratic death. But tonight, in November 1895, he doesn't know that. Or maybe he does. Maybe everyone who drinks 5 litres a day knows on some level that they're killing themselves. Maybe they just don't care, or can't stop, or both. He's drinking again now, a long pull from his glass. His friend Maurice Guibert has joined him, another regular photographer and hedonist. They're talking, laughing about something. Lautrec's laugh is distinctive, loud and uninhibited. He doesn't do anything halfway. The walking stick people talk about, the one allegedly filled with absinthe. I've never seen him with it here. Maybe it's urban legend, maybe he only uses it elsewhere. But the legend tells you something true about his reputation. Everyone knows Toulouse-Lautrec drinks. Everyone knows he's at the cabarets every night. He's become part of the mythology of the place, as much a fixture as the Black Cats or the Shadow Theatre. His artistic influence is hard to overstate. He's essentially inventing the modern poster as we know it. Before him, advertisements were dense with text and realistic illustration. He strips that down. Bold colours, minimal text, striking compositions that grab attention from across the street. Every modern poster, every billboard, every advertisement that treats the image as more important than the words, that starts with Lautrec. And his influence on painting itself, particularly the direction art will take in the next decade. Look at how he flattens space, uses colour non-naturalistically, treats the canvas as a 2-dimensional surface rather than a window into 3-dimensional reality. That's moving toward modernism, toward fauvism, toward the radical simplifications that will characterize 20th century art. But he's not thinking about art history. He's drawing a cat now. One of the cabaret's resident felines has jumped onto his table and is interfering with his work. He's sketching around the cat, incorporating it into whatever he's creating. The cat seems unconcerned, settling into a spot right on his sketch pad. Someone's asked him to draw their portrait. He agrees, gestures for them to sit. They're nervous. Imagine having Toulouse-Lautrec draw you. knowing his reputation for unflattering honesty. He works quickly, his eyes moving between their face and the paper. 5 minutes maybe. Then he shows them the result. Their reaction is complicated. It's definitely them, recognizably them, but it's also more honest than a mirror. He's caught something in their expression, some habitual tension or hidden sadness that they probably weren't aware they were showing. Is it flattering? Not really. Is it true? Undeniably. That's his gift and his curse. He can't not see people accurately, can't idealize them even if he wanted to. His hand won't lie. His father, Count Alphonse, came to Montmartre once, wanted to see where his son was spending his time, what kind of life he was living. The visit was a disaster. The Count in full aristocratic regalia, completely out of place among the Bohemians. Henri introduced him to dancers and prostitutes with deliberate provocation. His father left in disgust, and they barely spoke again after that. Can you imagine that divide? The father ashamed of the son's body, ashamed of his associations, unable to see the brilliance in the work. The son defiant, choosing this world specifically because it accepts what his family rejected. It's tragedy on both sides, really. But here's what makes Lautrec's work revolutionary beyond the technique. He painted the demi-monde without judgment. Not romanticizing it, he showed the exhaustion, the alcohol, the aging process that the stage lights temporarily hid. But not condemning it either. Just observing, recording, creating art from lives that respectable society pretended didn't exist. He painted brothel scenes that are shockingly intimate. Women in their private moments, washing, dressing, sleeping, being human, rather than performing sexuality. These paintings weren't sold publicly during his lifetime. They were too honest, too unvarnished. But they're some of his most powerful work, treating sex workers as individuals with interior lives rather than as objects or symbols. The comparison with his academic training is stark. At the École des Beaux-Arts, he learned to paint mythological scenes, historical subjects, idealized nudes posed like Greek statues, and he was good at it, technically proficient, capable of academic excellence. But then he came to Montmartre and thought, why paint gods and heroes when I can paint Le Goulou? Why idealize nudes when I can draw the real bodies of real women in a real brothel? Why pretend art has to be separate from life? That choice to paint the present, the real, the unheroic, that's what makes him modern. That's what separates 19th century art from 20th century art. The willingness to look at actual life and find it worthy of art. Someone singing now, a popular song from the music halls, Lautrec knows all the words, is singing along while sketching. His voice is reportedly terrible, but he doesn't care. Another thing to love about him, complete lack of self-consciousness about his limitations. Can't sing, sing anyway, can't walk well, dance anyway, can't fit into normal society, create your own. The sketch he's working on now is for a poster, you realise. He's designing something for one of the upcoming shows, working out the composition. You can see him moving elements around in his mind, trying different arrangements. This is how his iconic posters begin, in crowded cabarets, surrounded by noise and smoke and humanity. His colour sense is extraordinary. When these sketches become posters, he'll use colours that aren't naturalistic at all. Bright greens, harsh yellows, acidic pinks, colours that vibrate against each other, that grab attention, that feel modern and slightly discordant. He understands that posters have to work at a distance, have to compete with everything else vying for attention on a Paris street. And the lithographic process fascinates him. The way you can create multiple colours from multiple stones, layering them to create complex images. The slight imperfections in registration that become part of the aesthetic. The possibility of mass production, hundreds of identical copies, democratizing art, putting it on street corners instead of in galleries. This is a man born into the aristocracy who became one of art's great democrats, who wanted his work seen by everyone, not just the wealthy, who chose subject matter that spoke to ordinary pleasures rather than elevated ideals. He's standing now, unsteady on his legs but determined. He's seen someone across the room. Yvette Gilbert has arrived. She's a singer, famous for her long black gloves and her bitter, satirical songs. Lautrec has painted her multiple times, and she hates the portraits. She thinks he makes her ugly, emphasizes her thin frame and sharp features. But the paintings and posters of Yvette Gilbert are brilliant precisely because they're unsentimental. He captures her intelligence, her wit, the sharpness that makes her performances electric. She's not pretty in his images. She's powerful. There's a difference. They're talking now. You can't hear the conversation, but her gestures suggest exasperation. His suggest amusement. This is probably about the latest poster. She probably wants him to make her more conventionally attractive, and he's probably refusing. This exact argument has happened between them before and will happen again. But she keeps working with him, because despite her protests, she knows his images sell tickets. People see a Lautrec poster and want to see the real person. His art creates celebrity in a way that flattering portraits never could. The clock shows nearly 10:30 now. The evening is deepening. The cabarets will stay open until 2 or 3 in the morning, maybe later. Lautrec will be here until they close. He always is. Then probably to a brothel, then maybe home to his studio to work on the sketches he's made tonight. 2 or 3 hours of sleep, then up again. It's killing him. Anyone can see that. The alcoholism is aging him rapidly, making his hands shake when he's not drawing, causing falls and accidents. His friends worry. His mother begs him to slow down. But he can't or won't. This is his life, the cabarets, the dancers, the alcohol, the art, all intertwined, inseparable, and maybe that's the only way he can make the art. Maybe he needs to be inside this world, soaked in it, to capture it so truthfully. You can't paint what you don't live, but there's a cost. There's always a cost. He's back to sketching now, already moved on from whatever Yvette Gilbert said. Drawn to something else, some other moment worth capturing. The constant hunger to observe, to record, to transform life into lines on paper. This man, this damaged, brilliant, doomed aristocrat turned bohemian artist. He's creating the visual language of the Belle Époque. When you think of this era, you're probably thinking of his images whether you know it or not. The dancers, the cabarets, the posters, the sense of vibrant nightlife, he made that. He looked at this world and said, "This is beautiful, this is worth remembering, this matters." And he was right. But speaking of dancers and vibrant nightlife, there's someone we need to talk about. Someone whose image Toulouse-Lautrec captured so perfectly that she became the symbol of an entire era. Someone whose rise and fall encapsulates everything glorious and tragic about the Belle Époque entertainment world. Listen, do you hear that music changing? The can-can is about to start. And La Goulou, Louise Weber, the woman who invented modern cabaret dance as we know it, her story is next. And trust me, it's not the story you expect. The music shifts suddenly, and the entire energy of Le Chat Noir transforms. The piano crashes into a fast driving rhythm, 2/4 time, relentless, insistent. People are already moving, pushing tables back to create space, because when the can-can music starts, everything else stops. This is what people came for, whether they admit it or not. But La Goulou isn't here tonight. Not at Le Chat Noir, anyway. She's performing at the Moulin Rouge, where the real money is. Still someone else will dance, and the spirit of what she created lives on in every high kick, every flash of petticoat, every deliberately scandalous movement. Let me tell you about Louise Weber, because the woman who became Le Goulou, the glutton, started life as far from glamorous as you can imagine. Born 1866 in Clichy, just outside Paris. Working class family, father a labourer, mother a laundress. By age 16, Louise was working in a laundry herself, carrying wet sheets that weighed more than she did, hands raw from lye soap, breathing steam all day for maybe 2 francs if she was lucky. That was her future, mapped out. Marry young, probably to another labourer, have too many children, work until her body gave out, die before 50. But Louise had something most laundry girls didn't have. She could dance, not formally trained dance. She never had a ballet lesson in her life, but natural rhythm, physical confidence, and absolute fearlessness. She started going to dance halls in her free time, the public bal musettes where working-class Parisians went to let loose on Sunday afternoons, and she was good. People noticed. By 18, she'd quit the laundry and was dancing semi-professionally at the Moulin de la Galette, one of the dance halls in Montmartre. By 20, she'd caught the attention of Charles Ziedler and Joseph Oller, the entrepreneurs opening a new cabaret called the Moulin Rouge. And by 23, in 1889, she was the most famous dancer in Paris. How? What did she do that was so revolutionary? She made the can-can dangerous. Now, the can-can itself wasn't new. It had existed since the 1830s as a kind of wild working-class dance. Lots of jumping high kicks, general mayhem. But it had been cleaned up, domesticated, made acceptable for middle-class audiences. The kicks weren't that high. The petticoats stayed mostly down. It was energetic but safe. Louise Weber looked at that and thought, boring. So she kicked higher. She kicked so high her leg went straight up, her foot above her head, showing everything, and I mean everything, underneath those petticoats. Black stockings, garters, sometimes just skin. In the 1880s, when respectable women kept their ankles covered, this was genuinely shocking. But she didn't stop there. She'd do le grand écart, the splits, right there on the dance floor. Drop into a full split, legs extended, then bounce back up. The athleticism was extraordinary. The sexual suggestion was unmistakable. And she had a partner who matched her energy. Valentin le Désossé, the boneless one. Real name Etienne Renaudin, a wine merchant by day who danced for fun. Tall, thin, impossibly flexible, he could bend his body in ways that looked anatomically impossible. Together, Louise and Valentin created a style of can-can that was part dance, part acrobatics, part deliberate provocation. The nickname Le Goulou, the glutton, came from her habit of walking through the Moulin Rouge between performances and drinking the dregs from customers' glasses, just picking up half-finished champagne and downing it, bold as brass. Some said she did it because she was genuinely thirsty and couldn't afford her own drinks. Others said it was performance, creating a persona, making herself memorable. Probably both. A dancer has taken the floor here at Le Chat Noir now. Not Le Goulou's calibre, few are, but competent. She's wearing the classic can-can dancer outfit. White blouse, black corset, layers of petticoats in bright colours underneath a dark outer skirt. The petticoats are the key to the whole effect. They are designed to flare and lift when you spin or kick, revealing those bright layers in a flash of colour and movement. She starts with a chahut, the preliminary dance, kind of sassy walking, hip movements, teasing the audience, building anticipation. Then the music accelerates and she goes into the actual can-can, the port d'arme, holding her skirt out like arms while kicking. The high kicks, one after another, machine gun rhythm. She's good, getting her foot well above her head, showing the ruffled bottoms of her petticoats. The crowd is appreciating it, clapping in rhythm. But here's what made Le Goulou special. It wasn't just the kicks, it was the attitude. Louise Weber danced with absolute confidence, bordering on arrogance. She'd seen stare at men in the audience while dancing, challenging them. Sometimes she'd deliberately kick a man's hat off his head. Part of the act, supposedly spontaneous but actually calculated. The men loved it, being singled out, becoming part of the show. And she was rude, gloriously, outrageously rude. She'd insult audience members, particularly wealthy ones, called the Prince of Wales Bertie to his face when he visited the Moulin Rouge, told rich businessmen they were fat and boring, and they'd laugh and tip her anyway because the insults were part of the performance, part of what made her Lagulu. Think about the class dynamics here. A working-class laundry girl from Clichy, insulting princes and industrialists, and getting paid for it. Getting famous for it. In a society built on rigid class hierarchy and deference to wealth, she was revolutionary simply by refusing to be deferential. The Toulouse-Lautrec posters immortalized her. The most famous one from 1891 shows her mid-kick at the Moulin Rouge, leg impossibly high, petticoats flying. In the foreground, silhouettes of the crowd, including Valentin, his distinctive top hat. The poster made her iconic. People came to the Moulin Rouge specifically to see the woman from the poster. At her peak, probably 1890 to 1895, Lagulu was earning serious money. Exact figures are hard to verify, but some sources suggest she made up to 15,000 francs per year from the Moulin Rouge, plus tips, plus side income from private performances. Remember, a factory worker made maybe 1,200 francs per year. She was making more than 10 times that. She invested some of it badly, or rather didn't invest it at all, spent it on clothes, champagne, living large. Can you blame her? She'd grown up in poverty. Suddenly she had money and fame. Of course she spent it. But the fame came with costs that don't show up in the financial ledgers. Her body was her instrument, and she was playing it hard. Multiple performances per night, 7 nights a week. Those high kicks, those splits, their murder on the joints and muscles. By her mid-20s she was dealing with chronic pain, using increasing amounts of alcohol to manage it, and the sexual attention was constant and often unwanted. Men assumed because she showed her legs on stage that she was sexually available off stage. She had liaison, sure. She wasn't a saint, but on her own terms. She refused to become a kept woman, refused the courtesan path that might have made her even wealthier. She wanted to control her own life. The dancer here has finished her routine to enthusiastic applause. She's breathing hard, sweating, clearly exhausted. That's another thing people don't realize about the can-can. It's brutally physically demanding. You're basically doing cardio and acrobatics simultaneously for 10 or 15 minutes straight. The dancers who made it look effortless were working incredibly hard. Jane Avril danced differently from Lagulu. Where Louise was all energy and aggression, Jane was subtle, almost melancholic. She'd been institutionalized for nervous disorders as a teenager, and she said dancing was the only thing that calmed her mind. Her style was more refined, less overtly sexual, but equally captivating in its own way. Then there was Nini Pattes en l'air, Nini legs in the air, whose specialty was spinning while doing high kicks, creating this whirlwind of petticoats and legs. And Grille d'égout, sewer grating so called because she'd do the splits over the air vents and the floor of the Moulin Rouge, her skirt spreading over the grate. Each dancer had a gimmick, a specialty, something that made them distinctive. Because the can-can world was competitive, cutthroat even. New dancers were constantly arriving, younger, hungrier. If you didn't evolve, you disappeared. Lagulu didn't evolve. That was her tragedy. By 1895, this exact year we're in right now, she's already starting to fade. She's 29, which in can-can years might as well be ancient. She's put on weight, not much, but enough that the high kicks are harder, the movements less sharp. She's drinking more, showing up late to performances or sometimes not at all, and the Moulin Rouge is bringing in new dancers, younger women who've studied Le Goulou's style and can replicate it. The audience's attention is already shifting. Within a few years, she'll leave the Moulin Rouge, try to start her own show, a kind of fairground attraction featuring belly dancers and herself as the main act. It'll fail. She'll lose money, lose her remaining fame, sink into obscurity. By the 1920s, Le Goulou, once the most famous dancer in Paris, the woman whose image was on posters across Europe, will be selling peanuts and cigarettes at fairs. A few old-timers will recognize her, remember when she was magnificent. Most won't know or care. She'll die in 1929 at age 63, poor and largely forgotten. A newspaper will run a small obituary calling her a figure from the old Montmartre. That's it. The woman who revolutionized dance, who became a symbol of Belle Époque Paris, reduced to a footnote. But tonight, in November 1895, she's still performing at the Moulin Rouge, still capable of those incredible kicks, still drawing crowds. If you left Le Chanois now and walked 15 minutes, you could see her. Watch her do the exact routine that Toulouse-Lautrec captured in those posters. Would you recognize in her face, in her movements, the seeds of her eventual decline? Maybe. Or maybe you'd just see the performance, the energy, the seemingly inexhaustible vitality of youth. The can-can embodied something essential about the Belle Époque. The celebration of physical pleasure, the rejection of Victorian prudishness, the elevation of entertainment and spectacle. But it also embodied the era's cruelty, the way it consumed its performers, discarded them when they aged, forgot them almost before they were dead. Every dancer who strapped on those petticoats and stepped onto a cabaret stage was making a gamble. Fame versus respectability. Money now versus security later. The thrill of performance versus the grinding reality of what it did to your body. Most lost that gamble. Even the ones who won, like Le Goulou, eventually lost. The music here at Le Chanois is shifting again, slowing down. The can-can portion of the evening is over. People are settling back into their seats, ordering more drinks, resuming conversations. The dancer who performed is at the bar now, drinking water rapidly, still catching her breath. Someone buys her a champagne, and she accepts it with a professional smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Do you think she knows what's ahead? The pain, the competition, the inevitable aging out of the profession? Probably. Most dancers aren't naive. But what choice does she have? Go back to the laundry, marry and have babies? At least dancing gives her a few years of excitement, of being admired, of making more money than she'd ever make scrubbing clothes. It's a devil's bargain, but sometimes the devil's bargain is the best one on offer. Toulouse-Lautrec is still in his corner, probably sketching the dancer who just performed, adding her to his collection of images, his visual archive of Montmartre nightlife. In 100 years, someone might look at that sketch in a museum and wonder who she was. Probably no one will know her name. That's the thing about being part of history versus being famous in your own time. Le Goulou was famous, genuinely, internationally famous. But she's not really remembered, not the way Toulouse-Lautrec is remembered. The artist who documented the performers outlasted the performers themselves. There's a lesson there, maybe. Create something that lasts longer than your body. Or don't, and accept that glory is temporary. Both are valid choices. Both have their costs. The evening is deep now, moving toward 11 o'clock. The absinthe has done its work. Conversations are louder, laughter more frequent, inhibitions lowered. This is the moment when the carefully maintained performances start to slip, when you see behind the masks people wear in public. And in a cabaret full of poets, painters, prostitutes and poseurs, the masks are elaborate and the glimpses behind them are fascinating. Because sitting at a table near the back, looking more dishevelled than when we saw him earlier, is Paul Verlaine, the poet, the man whose brilliant revolutionary verse defined an entire literary movement. The man whose personal life was such a spectacular disaster that it makes everyone else in this room look functional by comparison. His story, his relationship with Arthur Rimbaud, his violence, his genius, his descent into poverty and alcoholism, that's where we need to go next. Because if you want to understand the Belle Époque, you need to understand what it did to its artists, how it celebrated them and destroyed them simultaneously. Verlaine is motioning to someone, calling for more wine. His hands are shaking, his beard is stained, but his eyes are still sharp, still observing, still transforming everything he sees into potential poetry. And the story he has to tell about love and madness, about beauty and violence, about the price of being a genius in a world that doesn't know what to do with genius, that story is just beginning. Paul Verlaine looks like he's been assembled from spare parts that don't quite fit together. His coat is threadbare, stained with wine, and probably worse. His collar is missing, exposing a neck that's somehow both thin and flabby. His beard is unkempt, grey streaked with yellow from tobacco. He's 51 years old and looks 70, but when he speaks, when he recites poetry, which he's doing right now to a small audience of younger poets gathered around his table, something transforms. His voice gains strength, loses its alcoholic slur, becomes musical. Because whatever damage he's done to his body, to his life, to everyone around him, he's still Paul Verlaine, still one of the greatest poets France has ever produced. He's reciting something from Romances sans paroles, Romances without words, his collection from 1874. The words fall like rain, melancholic and beautiful, creating atmosphere through pure sound as much as meaning. This is symbolist poetry at its finest. Suggestion over statement, music over message, emotion captured in rhythm and imagery. The young poets are silent, reverent. They're listening to a legend, even if that legend smells like he hasn't bathed in a week and can barely sit upright. Let me tell you how Paul Verlaine got here, to this moment, to this table, to this condition. Because his story is the dark side of Belle Époque artistry. What happens when genius meets self-destruction and self-destruction wins? Born March in 1844 in Metz, northeast France. Comfortable middle-class family, good education, showed literary talent early. By his early 20s, he was part of the Parnassian poetry movement, writing formally perfect verse, getting published in respectable journals. At 25, he married a 16-year-old girl named Mathilde Mautet. Sweet, conventional, completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Because in September 1871, Paul Verlaine received a letter from a teenage boy in provincial France. The boy had read Verlaine's poems and wanted advice. His name was Arthur Rimbaud. He was 16 years old, and he was about to destroy Verlaine's life and create some of the most revolutionary poetry ever written in the process. Verlaine invited Rimbaud to Paris. The boy arrived in September, and Verlaine saw him for the first time, wild-haired, impossibly young, beautiful in a feral kind of way, and radiating an intensity that was almost frightening. They were lovers within days. Verlaine was 27, Rimbaud was 16. The relationship was passionate, volatile, often violent. They drank together, absinthe mostly, consumed in quantities that would kill normal people. They wrote together, pushing each other toward new ways of thinking about poetry. Rimbaud's theory was that the poet must make himself a visionary through a systematic derangement of all the senses, essentially destroy your normal perception through alcohol, drugs, sleep deprivation, whatever it took, and write from that altered state. Verlaine was already drinking heavily. Rimbaud gave him permission, even encouragement, to drink more, to go further, to chase visions regardless of the cost. Mathilde, Verlaine's young wife, watched her husband transform into someone she didn't recognize. He became violent, hitting her, threatening her, once threw their infant son against a wall. She left him, took the baby, filed for separation. Verlaine barely seemed to notice. He was obsessed with Rimbaud. In July 1872, the two poets left Paris together, just vanished, heading to Belgium, then London, living in poverty, writing constantly, drinking more constantly. Rimbaud was 17, Verlaine was 28 and throwing away everything, marriage, career, respectability, for this impossible relationship. The poetry they produced during this period was extraordinary. Verlaine's romances sans parole captured the mood of their wandering, the sense of being unmoored from society, drifting in a world of pure sensation. Rimbaud was writing the poems that would become A Season in Hell and Illuminations, visionary, hallucinatory works that essentially invented modern poetry as we know it. But the relationship was disintegrating. They fought constantly. Rimbaud was cruel, verbally abusive, dismissive of Verlaine's work, sleeping with other people to hurt him. Verlaine was dependent, needy, increasingly unstable. The age difference, the power imbalance, the alcohol, it was toxic in every possible way. In July 1873 in Brussels, after a particularly vicious fight, Verlaine bought a revolver. He drank for courage. Then he shot Rimbaud. Let that sink in. One of France's greatest poets shot another of France's greatest poets in a hotel room in Brussels because of a love affair that had gone catastrophically wrong. The bullet hit Rimbaud in the wrist. Not fatal, but serious. Verlaine panicked, ran into the street, threatened to shoot himself, was arrested. Rimbaud initially refused to press charges, but Verlaine's behavior was so erratic that the police investigated anyway. They discovered the sexual relationship, sodomy, illegal in Belgium and France. Verlaine was tried, convicted, sentenced to 2 years in prison. Rimbaud recovered and returned to France. He never saw Verlaine again. Within 2 years, he had stopped writing poetry entirely at age 20 and spent the rest of his life as a trader in Africa, dying at 37 without ever returning to the literary world. Verlaine served his sentence, 18 months in Belgian prison. When he released in 1875, he was a convicted criminal, abandoned by wife and family, separated from the boy he loved, his reputation in ruins. And yet, the poetry he'd written, particularly romances sans parole, slowly began to gain recognition. Young poets read it and realized something revolutionary had happened. This wasn't traditional poetry. This was something new. Music made from words, emotion captured in rhythm, suggestion instead of statement. By the 1880s, Verlaine was famous again. Not respectable, never respectable, but famous. Young poets sought him out, wanted to learn from him, bought him drinks in cabarets like Le Chat Noir. He became the elder statesman of symbolism, the movement he'd helped create. He's finished reciting now, accepting praise from the young poets around his table. Someone buys him more wine. He drinks it gratefully, hands shaking. The transformation you saw during the recitation, that glimpse of the artist he still is, fades. He's just a drunk old man again. Here's what life looks like for Paul Verlaine in November 1895. He's poor. Despite his fame, despite being published, despite occasional payments from journals and patrons, he's chronically broke, spends everything on alcohol, lives in cheap hotels that rent by the week, sometimes sleeps in hospital charity wards when he's too sick or drunk to function. He's sick. Syphilis, alcoholism, probably tuberculosis, chronic leg infections from old injuries. His body is failing in multiple ways simultaneously. He requires a cane to walk, often can't walk at all. He has no stable relationships. His wife divorced him years ago. Rimbaud is in Africa, silent, might as well be dead. Verlaine has had other lovers, men and women, though mostly men, but nothing lasting. Everyone eventually leaves because living with him is impossible, and yet people still seek him out. Young poets like these at his table, wanting to hear him talk about poetry, about Rimbaud, about the old days. He's a living monument to artistic rebellion, to choosing art over comfort, to burning brightly even if it burns you out. There's a younger poet here named Ernest Reynaud, taking notes while Verlaine talks. He'll later write a memoir about the Belle Époque literary scene, and Verlaine features prominently, not as tragic figure, but as vital presence, someone whose very existence proved that genuine poetry still mattered in an increasingly commercial world. Another regular at these tables is Jules Jouy, the chansonnier, songwriter and performer. He's the one who sang during that first shadow play experiment with Henri Rivière years ago. Now he's an established performer, but he still comes to Le Chat Noir to drink with the poets, to participate in the spontaneous creativity that happens here. There's Alphonse Allais too, humorist and writer, famous for his absurdist humour and elaborate practical jokes. He once submitted a completely blank page to an art exhibition titled First Communion of Anemic Young Girls in the Snow. That's the kind of mind that thrives in Montmartre, playful, irreverent, willing to mock everything, including art itself. And sitting slightly apart, observing rather than participating, is Maurice Donnet. He's newer to the scene, a young playwright who'll become famous for his comedies about prison society. Right now he's just watching, absorbing, learning how the bohemian world works. These poets and writers represent something important about Le Chat Noir and Montmartre generally. It's not just about performance or entertainment. It's about community, a place where artists can gather, share work, get immediate feedback. Brutal feedback sometimes, but honest. When Rodolphe Salis started Le Chat Noir in 1881, one of his innovations was creating that back room, l'Institut, specifically for artists. No paying customers allowed. Just poets, painters, musicians working out ideas together. That model spread to other cabarets, creating a network of spaces where art could develop collaboratively. Verlaine is talking about Rimbaud now. He does this often when drunk, which is always, talking about Rimby, as he calls him. The ghost of their relationship haunts every conversation. He was 17, Verlaine is saying, his voice thick with wine and memory. 17 and already beyond anything we were doing, beyond anything anyone was doing. I thought I understood poetry, and then I met him, and I realized I understood nothing. Is this true? Probably. Rimbaud's poetry was revolutionary in ways that still resonate today. His theory of the visionary poet who achieves new perception through systematic derangement, that influenced surrealism, beat poetry, modern experimental writing. He essentially said, destroy your normal way of seeing and you'll see truth. It's romantic, dangerous, and possibly insane. It's also the foundation of a lot of modern art. But the cost? Look at Verlaine, at what that philosophy did to him. The derangement became permanent. The drinking that was supposed to enable vision just became drinking. The transgression that was supposed to liberate him from bourgeois constraints left him isolated, sick, dying slowly in public. Someone asks Verlaine if he has regrets. He laughs, a sound like breaking glass. Regret, he says. I regret shooting him, not loving him, never loving him. Even if I could go back, knowing everything, I'd still get on that train to Belgium. I'd still choose him over everything else. What's respectability compared to having truly lived? The young poets nod, taking this as wisdom. But is it? Or is it rationalization, the story Verlaine tells himself to make his suffering meaningful? Maybe both. Maybe wisdom and rationalization are the same thing when you're 51 and dying and your greatest work is 20 years behind you. Erik Satie has appeared at the piano. He's another regular here, a composer whose music is as strange and revolutionary as the poetry. He plays something atonal, unsettling, beautiful. The conversation's lower to accommodate it. This is what Le Chat Noir offers. These moments of spontaneous art, of different disciplines intersecting. Verlaine reciting poetry while Satie plays piano, while Toulouse-Lautrec sketches, while someone's drunk friend tries to join in and gets shushed. It's collaborative and competitive simultaneously. Everyone's trying to impress everyone else while also genuinely appreciating what others create. It's the opposite of academic art, which happens in isolation under formal rules. This is wild, immediate, sometimes brilliant, sometimes terrible, always vital. Claude Debussy used to come here too, before he got too successful and moved on to fancier venues. He'd play his early compositions, test them out on audiences who had no patience for boring music. If you couldn't hold attention in a crowded cabaret, your composition wasn't good enough. That's a kind of quality control that formal concert halls don't provide. If Parisian opera audiences are bored, they stay silent and applaud politely anyway. If Le Chat Noir's audience is bored, they talk over you or leave. It forces artists to make work that actually connects with people, not just with critics. Verlaine has pulled out a notebook, is scribbling something. Even now, even this drunk, he's still writing. The compulsion never stops. Someone asks what he's working on, and he waves them away irritably. Whatever it is private, not ready to share. Will it be any good? Maybe. Verlaine's late work is uneven. Some brilliant flashes, some forgettable stuff, some poetry that's clearly written by someone whose mind isn't working quite right anymore. But even his failures are interesting failures, attempts at capturing something true, even if the execution falls short. The tragedy of Verlaine, and maybe the tragedy of many artists, is that he knows the difference. He can tell when his new work doesn't measure up to his old work. Imagine that being Paul Verlaine, having written some of French literature's most beautiful poems and knowing you'll probably never write anything that good again, but still trying anyway, because what else would you do? There's dignity in that, I think. Choosing to keep creating even when you know you're past your peak. Refusing to stop just because the work isn't perfect. The notebook goes back in his pocket. He's drinking again. Someone has started an argument about whether poetry should rhyme. The older poets insisting on traditional forms, the younger ones wanting to break free of those constraints. Verlaine listens with amusement, having had this same argument 40 years ago and every year since. Make it musical, he finally says. Rhyme or no rhyme doesn't matter. If it doesn't sound like music, it's not poetry, just prose broken into short lines. This is Verlaine's core aesthetic. Poetry as music, sound as meaning. It's why his work influenced composers, why it translates poorly, why you need to hear it read aloud in French to really understand it. The evening is deep now, moving past 11 toward midnight. The crowd in Le Chat Noir has changed again. Some earlier patrons have left, new ones have arrived. But the core remains, the regulars, the people for whom this is more than entertainment, it's life. Verlaine will be here until closing probably, then probably to a brothel or a cheap hotel, or just walking the streets until dawn because he can't sleep. The routine of someone whose life has no structure except the structure alcohol imposes, drinking, brief sobriety, drinking again. But in the midst of that chaos, he's still Paul Verlaine, still a great poet, still teaching younger writers through example, even if the example includes cautionary elements alongside inspiration. And speaking of elements both cautionary and inspiring, there's something you need to see. Something that makes Le Chat Noir and all the other Montmartre cabarets look almost tame by comparison. Because just down the street, at the base of the hill, there are 3 cabarets that took the whole concept of theatrical entertainment and pushed it into the territory so bizarre, so macabre, so utterly strange that people are still talking about them over a century later. The Cabaret of Heaven, the Cabaret of Hell, and the Cabaret of Nothingness. And trust me, what happens in those places, the performances, the design, the whole experience, it's like nothing else in Paris. It's like nothing else anywhere. So let's leave Verlaine to his wine and his ghosts, and let's go see what happens when entertainment becomes spectacle, becomes something close to madness. You step out of Le Chat Noir into the November cold and the temperature shock is immediate. Inside it was warm, smoky, human. Out here, the wind cuts down the narrow streets of Montmartre like a blade. But you're not going far, just down the hill toward Boulevard de Clichy, where 3 of the strangest entertainment venues ever conceived sit waiting. Actually, they're right next to each other, literally neighbours, which means you could theoretically experience heaven, hell, and nothingness in the same evening, moving between them like some kind of theological tourist. And people do, lots of people. These cabarets are hugely popular, drawing crowds that rival even the Moulin Rouge. But why? What's the appeal of themed entertainment based on death and the afterlife? Let me take you there, and you'll understand. First stop, Cabaret du Ciel, the Cabaret of Heaven, number 53 Boulevard de Clichy. The facade is painted in blues and whites, studded with gold stars that catch the gaslight and seem to twinkle. There are sculptures of cherubs, those chubby baby angels, positioned around the entrance, looking simultaneously innocent and vaguely unsettling. Someone has painted clouds on the walls, complete with rays of golden light breaking through. It looks like a child's idea of heaven rendered in 3 dimensions. The doorman is dressed as Saint Peter, complete with fake white beard and golden keys hanging from his belt. He's greeting arrivals with theatrical formality, checking an imaginary book to see if they're worthy of admission. "Ah, a sinner!" he proclaims loudly when a well-dressed couple approaches, "but perhaps redeemable. Enter, and let the light of heaven cleanse your souls." He's playing it completely straight-faced, which somehow makes it funnier. You pay your entrance fee, 2 francs, same as most cabarets, and step inside. The interior is aggressively heavenly. Everything is painted in pastels. Baby blue, pale pink, soft gold. There are more cherubs everywhere, painted on the walls, suspended from the ceiling as decorations. Fake clouds made from cotton batting hang at different heights, creating this layered effect. The lighting is bright, almost harsh, all white and yellow, the opposite of the dim romantic lighting in most cabarets. The tables are painted white with gold trim. The chairs have wings attached to their backs, actual wings, probably chicken or goose feathers dyed white and mounted on frames. Sitting in them, you look like you've sprouted angel wings yourself. The waiters are dressed as angels, white robes, golden halos held up by wires attached to their heads, more wings strapped to their backs. They serve drinks while maintaining this beatific expression, speaking in hushed, reverent tones as if you're in church rather than a bar. "Would the blessed soul care for champagne?" one asks, approaching your table. Or perhaps ambrosia, which turns out to be just regular wine with a fancy name. The entertainment is where things get really interesting. There's a stage at the front where performers in angel costumes sing hymns and religious music, but with slight modifications to the lyrics that make them funny, without being explicitly blasphemous. They're walking a fine line, mocking religious ceremonies while not quite crossing into territory that would get them shut down. Then there are the purification rituals. Periodically, a performer dressed as an archangel appears and sprinkles water on the audience, holy water, that's probably just tap water, while chanting in fake Latin. People laugh and duck away from the spray. But it's all part of the show. The entire atmosphere is camp, theatrical, playful. They're parodying heaven and religious ritual, but doing it with enough humour that it feels more absurdist than sacrilegious. Though I'm sure some of Paris's more religious citizens are scandalised. That's probably part of the appeal. But here's the brilliant part of the Cabaret du Ciel's business model. At the end of the evening, St. Peter at the door announces that you've been judged and found wanting. You're being expelled from heaven. And he directs you to the exit, which leads directly to the Cabaret de l'Enfer, the Cabaret of Hell, right next door. The contrast is immediate and shocking. Where heaven was light and pastel, hell is dark and violent red. The facade is painted to look like a massive demonic face. Literally, the entrance is a gaping mouth with fangs. The doorway is designed to look like you're being swallowed. Above it, two giant eyes seem to follow your movement. The whole thing looks like something from a nightmare or a particularly dark fairground attraction. The doorman here is dressed as Mephistopheles. Red devil costume, horns, pointed tail, holding a pitchfork. When you approach, he points the pitchfork at you and shouts, "Enter and be damned! Abandon hope, all you who enter here!" It's pure theatre, deliberately over the top. But stepping through that mouth, through those fangs, there's a moment where your rational mind knows it's fake, and your lizard brain says danger anyway. Inside, it's spectacular in the most nightmarish way possible. The decor is caves and caverns, all painted in blacks and deep reds. The walls are covered with demonic faces, gargoyles, devils, tortured souls, all crafted with impressive detail. Smoke machines pump fog continuously, giving everything this hellish haze. The lighting is red and orange, flickering to simulate flames. And the heat. They've installed heating systems, rare in 1895, specifically to make the cabaret uncomfortably hot. You start sweating almost immediately. Combined with the smoke and the red lighting, it creates this oppressive atmosphere that's genuinely unsettling. The tables and chairs are designed to look like they're made from bones, probably just painted wood, but convincing from a distance. The walls have alcoves with tableaux of sinners being punished, mannequins in various states of torment, very grand guignol theatre. But the real showpiece is the central feature, a massive fireplace with a grate that glows bright orange, and behind it, more mannequins arranged to look like souls burning in hellfire. Jets of gas create real flames at intervals, and there's a mechanism that makes the mannequins seem to writhe. It's genuinely impressive special effects for the era. The waiters are dressed as demons, red costumes, horns, tails, sometimes with masks that cover their whole faces in demonic visages. They're deliberately rude to customers, insulting them, making threats in mock-serious tones, serving drinks with exaggerated contempt. "Sulphur and brimstone for the damned soul," one announces, slamming down what's probably just beer with food colouring. The entertainment includes demon dances, performers in elaborate devil costumes doing choreographed routines that are part ballet, part cabaret, all deliberately sinister. There's a torture chamber skit where volunteer audience members get put in fake medieval torture devices while demons prance around them. It's silly, but also kind of thrilling in a safe danger way. Periodically there are sound effects, screams, wails, thunder, chains rattling. The whole room will suddenly shake, supposedly from an earthquake in the underworld. Combined with the heat and the smoke and the alcohol, it creates this disorienting experience. American writer William Chambers Morrow visited these cabarets in the 1890s and wrote about bringing a friend named Mr. Tompkins. Tompkins was confused why anyone would patronize a place where they're insulted and terrorized. Morrow explained, "But this is Paris, Mr. Tompkins, and this particular part of Paris is Montmartre. That quote captures something essential. These cabarets work because the audience is in on the joke. Everyone knows its performance. The pleasure comes from the elaborate theatricality, from experiencing something transgressive and strange in a controlled environment. After perhaps an hour of hell's hospitality, you exit through another door and you're deposited outside on the street. But if you're committed to this journey through the afterlife, there's one more stop. Cross the street, walk down to number 64 Boulevard de Clichy, and you'll find the most unsettling of the three. Cabaret du Néant, the cabaret of nothingness. The facade here is black and grey, decorated with skulls, crossbones, and deliberately depressing quotes about death carved into the walls. The atmosphere before you even enter is one of morbid gloom. The doorman is dressed as an undertaker, top hat, long black coat, carrying a staff with the skull on top. He doesn't joke or play. His greeting is delivered in a monotone. Welcome to nothingness. All come here eventually. Inside, the decor commits fully to the death theme. The main room is called the intoxication room, their term, not mine, and it's designed to look like a crypt. The ceiling is painted with bones arranged in decorative patterns, mimicking the Paris catacombs. The walls have niches with skulls and more bones, probably plaster casts, but disturbingly realistic. The chandelier is made from a human skeleton, again probably a reproduction, but the effect is macabre. Other light fixtures are held by skeletal arms protruding from the walls. The bar itself is shaped like a sarcophagus, but here's where it gets really strange. The tables are coffins. Actual coffin-shaped boxes, lids removed, interiors lined with white satin. You sit on regular chairs, but your drinks rest on the coffin edge or inside the coffin itself. The waiters are dressed as undertakers or pallbearers, all in black, faces painted deathly pale. The menu features drinks with names like Microbe Killer, Gravedigger's Dream, and Nothing Cocktail. Each one comes with a morbid description delivered in sepulchral tones. But the main attraction, the reason people pack this place despite or because of its disturbing theme, is the resurrection show. Here's how it works. A volunteer from the audience is invited to participate. They're led to a special room off the main chamber. The room is set up like a funeral parlour. In the centre there's an actual coffin, full-sized, ornate, open to show its white satin lining. The volunteer is asked to lie down in the coffin. They're positioned with hands crossed over their chest, eyes closed. The undertaker performers arrange them like a corpse. Then the lid is closed, and then the real trickery begins. The room goes completely dark. Then lights begin to illuminate the coffin through coloured filters. First, the volunteer appears normal. Then, through clever lighting effects, they seem to decay. The colours shift, pale, then grey, then greenish. There are probably projections involved, shadows cast in specific ways to suggest decomposition. The effect, by all contemporary accounts, was genuinely disturbing. Multiple people reportedly fainted during these demonstrations. Others had to leave, unable to handle watching their friend or family member seemingly rot in real time. Then, at the show's climax, the lighting reverses. The decomposition appears to reverse. The volunteer returns to normal colouring, then becomes illuminated in golden light, suggesting resurrection or ascension. The coffin lid opens. The volunteer sits up, reborn. Everyone applauds. It's part magic show, part psychological manipulation, part morbid entertainment. And it was incredibly popular throughout the 1890s. What does this tell us about Belle Époque Paris? Why were people fascinated with these death-themed cabarets? Partly, I think, it's the aftermath of trauma. Remember, Paris in 1870 and 71 went through the Franco-Prussian War, the siege, the Commune uprising, mass death. Tens of thousands died in the streets. The city was traumatized. And sometimes trauma expresses itself through dark humor, through deliberately confronting the thing that terrifies you in a controlled setting. But there's also something about the Belle Époque specifically, this period of prosperity and pleasure that everyone sensed couldn't last forever. These cabarets let people play with the idea of mortality, of judgment, of what comes after, without actually having to face those questions seriously. And from a business perspective, themed entertainment was novel. Before these cabarets, entertainment venues were relatively generic, but the cabarets of heaven, hell, and nothingness offered experiences you couldn't get anywhere else. They were destinations, attractions, things to tell your friends about. The three cabarets operated through the 1890s into the early 1900s. But after World War I, after millions of actual deaths, after real hell experienced in the trenches, the appeal vanished. Nobody wanted to play at death anymore. They'd seen too much of the real thing. By the 1920s, all three had closed or transformed into different types of venues. The buildings still exist. You can visit Boulevard de Clichy today and see where they stood. But the cabarets themselves are gone, leaving only photographs, written descriptions, and this reputation for being some of the strangest entertainment venues ever created. It's nearly midnight now. The Montmartre night is reaching its peak. The cabarets are all full. The street is crowded with people moving between venues, searching for the next experience, the next thrill, and waiting at one of those venues, the most famous of all, the one that defines Belle Époque nightlife for generations to come. Something spectacular is about to happen. The Moulin Rouge is reaching its nightly crescendo, and if we hurry, we can catch the main show. The red windmill is turning against the night sky. The champagne is flowing, and inside on that famous stage, the dancers are preparing for the performance that made this cabaret a legend. So let's head there now. Let's see what made the Moulin Rouge not just popular but iconic. Let's witness the moment when art and commerce and spectacle combine into something that will outlast everyone involved. The red windmill is massive up close, 4 stories tall, blades painted bright red, illuminated by hundreds of electric lights, still a novelty in 1895, rotating slowly against the night sky. You can hear the mechanism creaking, the mechanical groan of the turning blades, audible even over the noise from inside the building. This is it, the Moulin Rouge. Opened October 6th, 1889, the same year as the Eiffel Tower. And just like that tower, the Moulin Rouge was designed to be impossible to ignore, a landmark visible from across Montmartre. The entrance is chaos, controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. A crowd of people trying to get in, doormen checking tickets, carriages arriving and departing, horses snorting steam in the cold air, street vendors selling roasted chestnuts and cheap souvenirs, prostitutes working the crowd, pickpockets working everyone. You pay your entrance, 3 francs, slightly more expensive than Le Chat Noir, positioning itself as more upscale, and you step inside. The first thing that hits you is the scale. The Moulin Rouge is enormous compared to Le Chat Noir's intimate rooms. The main hall can hold over 1,500 people. 1,500! All packed in here on a Friday night, drinking and smoking and shouting to be heard over the music. The decor is opulent in a deliberately excessive way. Red velvet everywhere, curtains, upholstery, wall coverings, massive chandeliers dripping with crystals, mirrors positioned to multiply the space, make it feel even larger. Gold paint on seemingly every surface that isn't red velvet. It's like being inside a jewel box designed by someone with no concept of restraint. But here's what makes the Moulin Rouge genuinely revolutionary. The mix of spaces and experiences they've created under one roof. There's this main hall where you're standing now, with tables arranged around a central dance floor and stage. That's for the general public, anyone who can afford the entrance fee and drinks. Then there's the garden in back. Yes, an actual garden, open air with trees strung with electric lights. Smaller stages, more tables. In warm weather, it's even more popular than the interior. Tonight, in November, it's mostly empty, but you can see a few hardy souls out there smoking in the cold. And throughout the building, there are private rooms. Salons particuliers, they're called. Private dining rooms that wealthy patrons can rent for the evening, with their own service, their own entertainment. What happens in those rooms? Well, management officially doesn't ask. But unofficially, everyone knows. They're where wealthy men bring courtesans, where business deals get made, where the more salacious aspects of Belle Époque nightlife happen away from public view. The business model here is sophisticated. Joseph Oler and Charles Zidler, the owners who opened this place, they understood something fundamental about entertainment economics. You need multiple revenue streams. So there's the entrance fees, 3 francs per person times 1,500 people on a busy night, that's 4,500 francs right there. Then there's the drinks, champagne at 10 francs per bottle, beer at 1 franc, absinthe at 2, with 1,500 people drinking for 4 or 5 hours, you're looking at tens of thousands of francs per night in alcohol sales alone. The private rooms rent for 50 to 100 francs per night, depending on size and location. And then there's the real genius move. The Moulin Rouge doesn't pay its star performers much. La Goulou, at her peak, made maybe 500 francs per month from the cabaret. That's good money, better than most workers, but it's a fraction of what the cabaret was making off her fame. The real money for dancers came from private arrangements with wealthy patrons who saw them perform. Ziedler and Oler created a system where the dancers essentially market themselves to potential patrons using the Moulin Rouge as their stage. The cabaret profits from the performances. The dancers profit from the relationships those performances create. Everyone wins, sort of, except when they don't. Right now, the main hall is reaching peak energy. It's about 12:15 in the morning, 15 minutes past midnight. The evening's main performance is about to begin. The Quadrille Naturaliste, the Natural Quadrille, which is just a fancy name for an organized can-can performance. The music shifts. The crowd recognizes it immediately, that driving, relentless 2/4 rhythm. People are pushing forward, trying to get closer to the stage. Tables near the front are premium positions, reserved for wealthy regulars, and here they come, the dancers, 8 women moving in a line onto the stage. They're wearing the classic can-can costumes, white blouses, black corsets, layered petticoats in bright colours, dark outer skirts. Their hair is piled high, studded with feathers and ribbons. They look simultaneously respectable and scandalous, which is exactly the point. La Goulou is in the centre. Even from a distance, even among other talented dancers, she dominates. There's something about her energy, her absolute confidence that draws every eye. To her right is Jane Averill, more refined, her movements precise where La Goulou's are explosive. The other dancers fill out the line: Nini Pattes en l'air, Grille d'égout, La Môme Fromage, Rayon d'Or, each with her own specialty, her own following among the regulars. The music accelerates. The dancers begin. What you're watching is choreographed chaos. They start together, synchronized, building energy. Then they break into individual performances, each dancer taking a moment to show her particular skill. High kicks, splits, rapid spins that make the petticoats flare out like colourful wheels. La Goulou does her signature move, a kick so high her foot touches the top of her head, leg perfectly straight, showing everything underneath those skirts. The crowd roars. Men stand shouting encouragement. Women gasp or laugh or look away depending on their sensibilities. But here's what makes this more than just titillation. It's genuinely athletic. These women are performing at a level that requires years of training and natural talent. The core strength needed to do repeated high kicks for 15 minutes straight, the flexibility for those splits, the stamina for the relentless pace. It's impressive by any objective measure. And they are not just dancing, they're performing personality. Lagulu is flirting with men in the front row, mocking them, occasionally kicking a hat off someone's head. Jane Avril is creating this aura of mysterious melancholy, even while doing the same athletic moves. Each dancer is selling not just skill, but persona. This is modern celebrity being born, right here. The idea that personality combined with talent creates something more valuable than either alone. Valentin Le Dessaussay has joined them on stage now. He doesn't do the high kicks, those are the women's territory. Instead, he does something arguably more difficult. He dances as their partner while also being a kind of comedic foil. Tall, thin, impossibly flexible, he bends and contorts around the dancers, creating visual contrast, making their athleticism look even more impressive. Watch how he moves. His legs seem jointless, bending at angles that shouldn't be anatomically possible. He can do this thing where he appears to collapse completely, dropping to the floor, then springs back up without using his hands. It's unnerving and mesmerizing simultaneously. Valentin is in his 40s now, old for this kind of dancing, but he's still got it. During the day, he's a wine merchant. Respectable, boring, completely ordinary. At night, he's the boneless one, the most famous male dancer in Paris. He doesn't get paid for this. He dances purely for the love of it, for the thrill of performance. The quadrille is building to its climax. All the dancers are on stage together now, synchronized again, kicks in perfect unison, the music reaching a frantic pace. The audience is clapping in rhythm, stamping their feet, the entire building vibrating with collective energy. And then, at the peak, they all drop into splits simultaneously. Le Grand Écart executed perfectly in sync. The visual impact is stunning. 8 women, legs extended in perfect straight lines, petticoats spread around them like flowers blooming. The audience goes wild. Applause, cheering, whistling, the kind of response that makes performers' weeks of pain and practice feel worthwhile. The dancers are standing, bowing, soaking in the adulation. They're sweating, breathing hard, clearly exhausted. But they're also exhilarated. This is what they do it for, this moment, this connection with an audience, this proof that they can command a room. But look closer at Lagulu's face. Is that strain visible behind the smile? She's 29. She's been dancing professionally for over a decade. Her knees are damaged. Her back hurts constantly. She medicates with champagne and brandy, which helps the pain but creates other problems. And she's watching the younger dancers, particularly Jane Avril, who's only 26, and seeing the inevitable future. Someone younger, fresher, will replace her. It's already happening. The Moulin Rouge management has been featuring Jane more prominently in recent months. The performance ends. The dancers exit to continued applause. The regular dancing resumes, couples taking the floor, the band shifting to something more suitable for social dancing. But the energy has changed. That performance was the peak. Now it's the slow descent toward closing time, toward people pairing off, toward the private arrangements being finalized, toward the transition from public entertainment to private transaction. Near the bar, you see Lagulu now out of her stage costume, drinking champagne that someone's bought for her. She's surrounded by admirers, mostly men, but also some younger dancers who idolize her. She's holding court, telling stories, probably exaggerating, definitely performing even off stage. There's a moment where she catches sight of Jane Avril across the room. Their eyes meet. Is there hostility there? Rivalry? Or just mutual understanding of what this life costs? Maybe all three. The Moulin Rouge will operate in essentially this form for about 25 more years, through the rest of the Belle Époque, through World War I, into the early 20s. Le Goulou will fade, be replaced, forgotten. Jane Avril will have a longer career, but eventually age out too. Valentin will keep dancing until he physically cannot anymore. But the Moulin Rouge itself, the building, the concept, the image, will outlast them all. It'll become a symbol, a brand, a tourist destination. Even today, more than a century later, the Moulin Rouge operates. The building burned in 1915 was rebuilt. The acts have changed. But that red windmill still turns. Because Zidler and Oller created something bigger than individual performers. They created an experience, a fantasy, a piece of portable Paris that people could consume. You didn't just go to the Moulin Rouge. You experienced the Moulin Rouge. You became part of the story. And that story of beautiful dancers and wealthy patrons, of champagne and cancan, of scandals and spectacle, that story was marketable. It could be exported. Within years there were Moulin Rouge imitations across Europe and in America, and even in Asia. None matched the original, but they all traded on the same fantasy. The clock shows nearly 1 in the morning now. The crowd is thinning slightly. The truly wealthy are heading to their private rooms or departing in their carriages. The middle-class patrons are calculating whether they can afford one more drink. The dancers who aren't stars are circulating, looking for private arrangements to supplement their meagre salaries. And in the corners, in the quieter spaces between the spectacle, you can see the reality behind the fantasy. The exhausted performers, the calculating negotiations between dancers and patrons, the class divisions that the cabaret supposedly erases, but actually just rearranges into different configurations. This is Belle Époque nightlife at its most vivid, glorious and sordid, beautiful and exploitative, creating art and destroying artists simultaneously. The Moulin Rouge is everything Montmartre promises and everything it costs. It's the reason people still romanticize this era, and it's proof that romanticization always leaves out the most important parts. But the night isn't over yet. Not keen. Because in these final hours, as the crowds thin and the performances end, as the champagne runs low and exhaustion sets in, that's when you see the real Montmartre. Not the staged version, but the aftermath. The dancers removing their costumes in cramped dressing rooms, counting their earnings, deciding whether to go home or accept that invitation from the wealthy man at table 12. The artists stumbling between cabarets, chasing one more inspiration, one more drink, one more moment of feeling alive. The poets reciting to increasingly empty rooms, the courtesans negotiating the terms of arrangements that will keep them comfortable for another month or year. That's the Montmartre that the posters don't show, the one that exists in the spaces between spectacles, and it's time we looked there too, at what happens when the lights come up, when the music stops, when the fantasy reveals itself as work. 3 o'clock in the morning and Montmartre is finally quieting down. The Moulin Rouge has closed its doors, though you can still hear music faintly from somewhere inside, probably a private party continuing in one of the salons. The last few patrons are stumbling out onto Boulevard de Clichy, deciding whether to find another venue still open, or finally admit the night is over. You have been walking for hours now, and your feet hurt. But there's something about this moment, this transition between night and morning, between performance and reality, that demands attention. This is when you see what Montmartre really is, beneath the costumes and the gaslight. Le Chat Noir is still operating barely. The crowd has thinned to maybe 20 people, mostly diehards who have nowhere else to go or no desire to leave. Sal has disappeared. Even his energy has limits. The waiters are cleaning tables with less enthusiasm than earlier, hoping everyone will take the hint and depart so they can close up. Toulouse-Lautrec is still at his corner table. Of course he is. He'll be one of the last to leave, probably helping himself to abandoned glasses of wine on his way out. His sketchpad is full now. Pages and pages of drawings from tonight. Dancers, poets, random strangers, cats. This is his harvest. The raw material he'll transform into lithographs and paintings over the coming weeks. A woman approaches his table. She's young, maybe 22, dressed well, but with that slightly dishevelled look that says the evening has been long. She sits without asking permission, which Toulouse-Lautrec doesn't seem to mind. They know each other, clearly. "Still working, Henri?" she asks. Her French has a slight accent. Belgian, maybe, or from somewhere in the provinces. He shows her the sketches. She flips through them, pausing on one of herself from earlier in the evening. "You make me look tired," she observes. "You are tired," he responds. "Why lie about it?" This is the kind of conversation happening all over Montmartre right now. The guards coming down, the performance is ending, people revealing versions of themselves they'd never show during the busy hours. The woman is a dancer at one of the smaller cabarets, not famous like La Goulou but making a living. She's been performing for 4 years, since she arrived in Paris from Lille with 50 francs and a belief that she could make it. She can dance, certainly. Whether she can make it, that's still uncertain. "Did you accept his offer?" Toulouse-Lautrec asks, referring to something they'll both understand, but you don't. She nods. "Starting next month. 200 francs, apartment in the 9th arrondissement, no other obligations." She's describing a kept woman arrangement. She's found a protector, someone who'll support her financially in exchange for exclusive sexual access. "Congratulations," Toulouse-Lautrec offers, the question mark audible. "Thank you," she replies, matching his uncertainty. Because is it congratulations? She's secured financial stability, which is no small thing. The alternative might be continuing to scrape by on dancers' wages, constantly worried about injury or aging, or simply falling out of fashion. But she's also commodified herself in a way that's impossible to uncommodify later. When this arrangement ends, and it will end, they always do, what then? These are the calculations women in the demi-monde make constantly. Security versus autonomy, comfort versus dignity, present survival versus future uncertainty. Toulouse-Lautrec offers her a drink from his glass. She accepts, takes a sip, makes a face. What is this? Absinthe, mixed with wine, mixed with whatever was left in glasses I found. You're disgusting, Henri. I know, but there's affection in the exchange. These two aren't lovers, probably never will be. But they're allies in the Montmartre economy, both using what they have to survive in a world that's fundamentally hostile to people like them. Across the room, Paul Verlaine has fallen asleep at his table, head resting on folded arms. Someone has draped a coat over his shoulders, an act of kindness from another regular who knows Verlaine has nowhere warm to sleep tonight. The coat won't be there when he wakes. Someone will steal it. But for now, it's a small mercy. A younger poet sits near Verlaine, watching him sleep with an expression mixing reverence and horror. This is his hero, the man whose poetry changed his life. And here's that hero, drunk to unconsciousness, coat borrowed, sleeping in a cabaret because he has nowhere else to go. What does the young poet think? Is he inspired by Verlaine's commitment to art over comfort? Or is he terrified of becoming Verlaine, of ending up here at 51 with nothing to show for decades of brilliant work except a reputation and liver damage? Probably both. The Belle Époque offers these stark examples constantly: the cost of artistic commitment, the price of refusing to compromise with bourgeois expectations. Near the door, a couple is having a quiet argument. She's a courtesan, successful enough to be at Le Chat Noir rather than a cheaper venue. He's her current primary protector, wealthy, older, married. The argument is about whether she'll attend some society function with him next week. She wants to be seen publicly with him. He's worried about his wife finding out. "You knew what this was," he's saying, keeping his voice low. "And you knew what I cost," she replies, equally quiet but intense. "Discretion was never part of our arrangement, and it's a negotiation disguised as an argument. They're both performing, even at 3 a.m. with almost no one watching. The performance never really stops. This is what the posters and paintings don't capture. The endless negotiations, the constant calculation of leverage and value, the way every interaction in the demi-monde is simultaneously personal and transactional." Toulouse-Lautrec's companion has left. He's back to sketching, though his hands are shakier now, the alcohol catching up with him, or maybe just exhaustion. What he's drawing isn't clear from where you're sitting, but he's focused, intense, the same concentration he showed hours ago when he was fresh. Someone has started cleaning around him, pointedly sweeping near his feet. He ignores it. The cleaner gives up, moves to another area. Toulouse-Lautrec will leave when he's ready, not before. Think about the stamina required to be him. To stay awake for 20 hours, drinking constantly, sketching constantly, engaging with people constantly. His body is already damaged. The genetic condition, the short stature, the chronic pain. But he pushes it relentlessly, as if trying to pack multiple lifetimes into the time he has. He knows probably that he won't live long. Most heavy drinkers have some awareness of the bargain they're making. He's trading longevity for intensity. Whether it's worth it, who can say? But it's his choice, made consciously. Outside, through the windows, you can see the sky beginning to change. Not light yet, but that pre-dawn shift from black to deep blue. L'heure bleue, the French call it. The blue hour. It's the most beautiful time in Paris, this transition moment. The city is quiet. The workers haven't started their day. The revellers have mostly gone home or passed out. There's a suspension, a pause, where Paris belongs only to those still awake to witness it. A few people are leaving Le Chat Noir now, heading out into that blue hour. Where are they going? Some have homes to return to, beds waiting. Others are heading to brothels, either to work or to be customers. A few will keep drinking, finding the bouillons that open early to serve workers, the all-night cafes in Les Halles market district. And some will walk, just walk through the streets, watching the city wake up, postponing the moment they have to return to whatever life they've built or failed to build. Jane Averill walks past outside, alone, moving quickly. She's changed out of her stage costume into regular clothes, a heavy coat against the cold. Where is she going at 3:30 in the morning? Back to her apartment probably, but taking the long route, walking off the adrenaline of performance. Does she see you watching through the window? Hard to say. She's looking straight ahead, focused on her own thoughts. But there's something in her posture, a kind of defended solitude that suggests she's very aware of being observed even when alone. This is the curse of performers. You can never fully escape being watched, being perceived. Even in privacy, you're conscious of how you'd look to an audience. It shapes how you move through the world. Inside Le Chat Noir, only about 10 people remain. The gas lights have been dimmed to conserve fuel. The temperature is dropping as the fires burn down. It's genuinely cold now, breath visible when you exhale. Toulouse-Lautrec stands, finally, gathers his sketch pads, puts on his coat and hat. The walk home will be difficult. He needs a cane. and even with it, walking is painful and slow. His studio is maybe a 15-minute walk for an able-bodied person. For him, 30 minutes at least, probably longer. But he'll make it. He always does. And when he gets there, he'll probably work for another few hours before sleeping, transferring tonight's sketches onto lithographic stones, planning which images to develop into full posters or paintings. The work never stops. That's the secret of being Toulouse-Lautrec. The drinking, the cabarets, the socializing, that's all work too. Research, material gathering. He's not just partying, he's studying, observing, collecting images to transform into art. Verlaine is being gently shaken awake by one of the remaining waiters. He wakes confused, disoriented, the borrowed coat falling off his shoulders. Where is he? What time is it? How did he get here? The questions are visible in his expression, even if he doesn't voice them. The waiter helps him stand, makes sure he's stable. Verlaine fumbles for coins, trying to pay for drinks he doesn't remember ordering. The waiter waves him off. "You're paid up, Monsieur Verlaine. Go home." Does Verlaine have a home to go to? In the technical sense, yes. He's staying in a cheap hotel this week. But home in the emotional sense, that's been gone for years, maybe decades. Home for Verlaine is the bottle, or the memory of Rimbaud, or the next poem he hasn't written yet. He shuffles toward the door, moving like a man much older than 51. In the blue light from outside, he looks almost transparent, like he's fading away even as you watch. This is the reality that the Belle Époque mythology leaves out. The broken people, the artistic casualties, the ones who created beauty and were destroyed by the effort. History remembers Verlaine's poetry, museums display Toulouse-Lautrec's posters. But the human cost of creating those works, the pain, the addiction, the loneliness, the slow dissolution of self, that gets aestheticized into romantic tragedy instead of being recognized as genuine suffering. You're one of the last patrons remaining. Time to go. The waiters are making it very clear through body language and pointed looks that they want to close. You step outside into the blue hour. The November cold hits immediately, cutting through your clothes. You can see your breath, see it drifting up toward the lightening sky. Montmartre is almost silent. A cat crosses the street. Somewhere distant, a church bell rings 4 times. 4 in the morning. You've been awake for, 22 hours, 23. Time has become elastic, unmeasurable. Down the street, a boulangerie is showing the first light in its windows. Bakers starting their day, kneading dough for bread that will be sold in a few hours. The smell of baking bread is starting to drift through the cold air, mixing with the lingering tobacco smoke and absinthe vapour. This is the shift change. Night people going to bed, day people waking up. 2 entirely different Parises passing each other, briefly in the blue hour, barely acknowledging the other's existence. The red windmill of the Moulin Rouge has stopped turning. The electric lights are off, making it look smaller, less magical. Just a building with a decorative windmill, waiting for evening to transform back into a fantasy. And that's the truth about all of this, isn't it? The Belle Époque, Montmartre, the cabarets, the artists, all of it requires darkness and alcohol and performance to maintain the illusion. In daylight sober, it's just people trying to survive in a city that's beautiful and cruel in equal measure. But we're not quite done. There's one more thing to see. One more moment to witness before we release you back to your own time, your own reality. Because as the blue hour deepens toward dawn, as the first true light begins to touch the rooftops of Montmartre, something happens. A transformation, subtle but profound. The city doesn't just wake up, it reveals itself. And what it reveals about beauty, about impermanence, about the fleeting nature of everything we've witnessed tonight, that's the final lesson of our Belle Époque evening. The sky is changing now, minute by minute. That deep blue is giving way to something lighter, touched with hints of pink and gold at the horizon. Dawn is coming, inevitable as everything else. You're walking down from Montmartre, retracing the path you climbed hours ago, but everything looks different now. The same cobblestones, the same narrow streets, but transformed by this particular light, this particular moment between night and day. There's a word in French, l'entre chien et loup, between dog and wolf. It refers to twilight. That time when you can't tell the difference between a friendly dog and a dangerous wolf in the dimming light. But it works for dawn too. This moment when you can't quite tell what's real and what was performance, what was authentic and what was illusion. That's what you've witnessed tonight. Not just history, not just entertainment, but something between the two. The Belle Époque as it actually was. Beautiful and ugly, inspiring and exploitative, creating art and destroying the artists who made it. Let me tell you what happens next. Not tonight. Tonight is ending. But in the years that follow this November evening in 1895, the Belle Époque will continue for about 19 more years, until August 1914, when Europe stumbles into the First World War and everything changes forever. La Goulou will leave the Moulin Rouge in 1895, this very year we've been inhabiting. She'll try to start her own show, fail, lose her money, end up selling cigarettes at fairs. By the 1920s, almost nobody remembers who she was. She'll die in 1929, poor and forgotten, just another casualty of an industry that consumed its stars. Jane Avril will fare slightly better. She'll keep dancing into the early 1900s, transition to legitimate theatre, eventually retire on modest savings. She'll live until 1943, surviving into the Nazi occupation of Paris, dying in a charity hospital. But at least she'll die with dignity, with some people still remembering her contributions. Toulouse-Lautrec has 6 years left. He'll drink himself into complete physical collapse by 1901, spend his final months in his mother's chateau being cared for like a child, and die in September of that year at age 36. But in those 6 years, he'll create some of his most iconic work. The posters you see in museums, the images that define the Belle Époque, many come from this final burst of desperate creativity. Paul Verlaine will survive another year and a half. He'll die in January 1896, just 2 months from tonight, in a Paris hospital, penniless of course. But France will give him a state funeral, thousands will attend, and his poetry will be recognized as revolutionary. Cold comfort for a man who died alone, but something. Arthur Rimbaud, remember him? Verlaine's young lover who changed poetry forever, then abandoned it. He's in Africa right now, this very moment, trading coffee and weapons, his poetry career long finished. He'll die in November 1891. Wait, that already happened. He's already dead, actually. Died 4 years ago of cancer, age 37, never having returned to France, never having written another line of poetry after age 20. Verlaine doesn't know yet. Nobody's told him, or maybe they have and he's forgotten. Either way, he spends his evenings talking about Rimbaud as if the boy is still out there somewhere, still brilliant, still alive with possibility. The cabarets themselves? Le Chat Noir will close in 1897 when Rodolphe Salis dies suddenly. Without his personality driving it, the place falls apart. The Moulin Rouge will burn down in 1915 but be rebuilt. It'll survive wars, depressions, changing tastes, eventually becoming a tourist attraction. Still operational today, though bearing little resemblance to what you witnessed tonight. The 3 death-themed cabarets, Heaven, Hell and Nothingness. They'll all close by the 1920s. After millions die in the trenches, after actual hell is experienced across Europe, nobody wants to play at death anymore. But here's what will last. The art. The paintings, the posters, the poetry, the music. the physical evidence of what these people created in the midst of chaos and exploitation and self-destruction. When you walk through a museum today and see a Toulouse-Lautrec poster, you're seeing this night, this exact night, these people, this world captured and preserved, the courtesan adjusting her hair, the dancer mid-kick, the poet slumped over his drink. They're all still here, frozen in lithograph and oil paint. Is that enough? Does it justify the cost? I don't know. I honestly don't know. What I do know is that the Belle Époque gave us a template for understanding how art and commerce intersect, how entertainment becomes spectacle, how personality becomes brand. Every modern celebrity, every viral performance, every carefully curated public image, it all traces back to innovations made in places like Le Chat Noir and the Moulin Rouge. La Goulou was one of the first modern celebrities in the sense we understand the term. Famous not just for talent, but for personality, for image, for the story people told about her. The Toulouse-Lautrec posters didn't just advertise her performances, they created her myth, and that myth outlasted her reality. Most people who know La Goulou's name know her from the posters, not from having seen her dance. She exists as image, as idea, as symbol. The real Louise Weber, the laundry girl from Clichy who could kick impossibly high. She's been consumed by her own mythology. Is that immortality? Or is it a different kind of death? The light is stronger now. Real dawn, not just the promise of it. The blue hour has passed into the golden hour, that brief moment when sunlight is soft and warm, when everything looks its best. You can see Montmartre clearly now in the morning light. The buildings that looked romantic and mysterious in gaslight are revealed as shabby, paint peeling, architecture sagging. The streets that seemed full of possibility and darkness are just narrow, muddy lanes. The magic requires darkness to survive, but that's okay. That's the point, maybe. The Belle Époque, the beautiful era, wasn't actually more beautiful than any other time. It just called itself that, marketed itself that way, created an image of beauty and elegance that persists even now. It was branding, the same way the Moulin Rouge was branding, the same way La Goulou was branding, and yet, there was something real there too. Real artistry, real innovation, real people making real choices about how to live, what to value, what to sacrifice for the chance to create something meaningful. The workers are out now, the regular people of Paris starting their day. A street sweeper pushing his cart, a milk delivery man making his rounds, a woman opening the shutters of her shop. They glance at you, this person who has clearly been up all night, probably drunk, definitely not one of them. This is who pays for the Belle Époque, really. The workers who serve drinks to dancers, the seamstresses who make the elaborate costumes, the laundresses who clean the wine stains and sweat, the invisible labour that makes spectacle possible. The Belle Époque celebrated individual genius, the great artists, the brilliant performers, the visionary entrepreneurs, but it ran on the backs of thousands of people whose names nobody remembers, who didn't get posters made of them, who just worked and survived and died without ever being transformed into mythology. That's the final lesson, I think. History is selective. It preserves what's interesting, what's beautiful, what's useful as symbol or story. Everything else, the majority of human experience, gets forgotten. But tonight, for these hours we've spent together, we've tried to see more completely, not just the performances, but the preparation, not just the artists, but the labour, not just the beauty, but the cost. We've walked through a single night in Belle Époque Paris, from gaslit evening to golden dawn, and witnessed the whole ecosystem, the cabarets and their economics, the artists and their demons, the dancers and their calculations, the poets and their pain. And now it's morning. The night is over. The performers are sleeping or trying to sleep. The cabarets are closed. The streets belong to workers and merchants, to the real Paris that existed before and after and during the Belle Époque, without ever quite being part of it. You're tired. I'm tired. We've been awake for an impossible amount of time, witnessed more than any one person should see in a single evening. Time to go home, time to sleep, time to let the strange magic of this night fade into memory, become story, eventually become history. But before you go, look back one more time, up the hill to Montmartre, to the red windmill, stationary now, waiting for evening to bring it back to life, to the narrow streets where artists and outcasts found community, to the cabarets where new forms of art were born and new forms of exploitation were perfected. It's all still there. Not the actual Belle Époque. That's gone as ever yesterday. But the spirit of it, the possibility of it, idea that art matters enough to sacrifice for, that beauty is worth pursuing even when it destroys you. Maybe that's the real legacy. Not the specific performers or places, but the permission they gave to future generations to take risks, to experiment, to choose passion over safety. Every artist who's ever stayed up all night working on something they believed in, they're living in Toulouse-Lautrec's tradition. Every performer who's ever pushed their body past reasonable limits for the sake of the show, they're channeling La Goulou. Every poet who's ever chosen truth over comfort, they're Verlaine's spiritual descendants. The Belle Époque ended. But what it represented, that reckless, beautiful, dangerous commitment to art and experience that never quite dies. It just changes form, finds new venues, new performers, new ways to break our hearts and make us believe that beauty is worth the cost. The sun's fully up now, Paris in daylight. Ordinary, magnificent, cruel, beautiful Paris. Our night is over. Thank you for walking through this long November night with me. Thank you for staying awake, for paying attention, for witnessing these lives that burned so brightly and briefly. The Belle Époque is gone. Everyone we met tonight, La Goulou, Toulouse-Lautrec, Verlaine, Jane Avril, all the courtesans and poets and dancers, they're all dead now, more than a century gone. But for these few hours, we brought them back. We walked where they walked, saw what they saw, understood, maybe just a little, what they felt. That's the gift of history when we do it right. Not just dates and facts, but resurrection. Temporary, imperfect, but real enough to matter. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about art or beauty or the cost of creating either, then maybe hit that like button. Maybe share this with someone who appreciates stories about broken, brilliant people trying to make something beautiful in a world that doesn't make it easy. And subscribe if you want more of these long, strange journeys through history, because there are so many more stories to tell, so many more nights to inhabit, so many more lives to witness. Next time we'll go somewhere different, a different city, a different era, a different kind of night. But the same commitment to seeing clearly, to honouring complexity, to recognising that history isn't simple, and neither are the people who make it. Until then, go to sleep, rest, dream of red windmills and green absinthe, of high kicks and shadow plays, of artists who loved beauty more than they loved their own survival. And when you wake up, maybe look at your own world a little differently. Maybe ask yourself what you're willing to sacrifice for, what beauty you're creating, what cost you're willing to pay. The Belle Époque is over, but every era is someone's Belle Époque. Maybe even this one, maybe even yours. Good night, or good morning, whichever it is where you are. Sweet dreams.